have 6:27, so we're not starting till 6:30, correct?
I usually start at a couple minutes beforehand, like 2 minutes beforehand, just in case there's any issues. I can wait though, if you'd like.
I was just thinking in case anybody was thinking of 6:30, which is when we're advertised, but
Yeah, that's fine still. It'll just be up and ready to go. So as soon as 6:30 happens, you should be good to go.
okay. Everyone can see that flag, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Come on.
Okay, I have 6:30 now. So as mayor, I call the Village of Cooperstown Board of Trustees meeting for April 27th open. And if you'll please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, which is on your screen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of
To the flag of the United States of America,
and to
and
the
to the
republic
republic for which it stands,
one nation, under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
Indivisible,
and
liberty and justice for all.
justice for all.
Thank you. And now I'll just get rid of that. There we are. We have received correspondence. In particular, we received 4 emails pertaining to the public hearing. We're going to have open tonight at 7 o'clock for proposed local law number 4 of 2020 to amend vehicle and traffic regulations, to amend parking regulations on Walnut Street. Those 4 letters you've all received, I believe, by email, and they will be included with the minutes of this meeting and that public hearing. I will just mention that the 4 letters were from Brian Hubble of 15 Walnut Street and Betsy J, also of Walnut Street, who were both opposed or had modifications, which I'm sure you reviewed, that they would like to see incorporated in that proposed local law number 4. There were 2 emails, one from Peter Regan and one from Aviva Schneider, endorsing and supporting the proposed local law number 4. We also received quite a few emails, which I think I will bring up later because they all pertain to the budget. In particular, we had 5 emails encouraging the retention and no cutting of funds in our budget for the summer parks program, opening our summer parks. And we also received one from Jim Tallman, but we'll bring those up again and mention them when we begin the budget review process at under new business at this portion of the meeting.
Ellen,
Mhm.
Ellen, excuse me, Barb and Jim Tung also sent a letter for Walnut Street in support of it.
In support, okay. All right, thank you, Terry. That was it for our correspondence?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So as I say, that public hearing will be opened at 7 o'clock for the Walnut Street regulations. Let's move on with our meeting. I know I sent a couple corrections, so I'll begin with the March 23rd, 2020 meeting. I don't know if anyone else submitted corrections or changes. Is there a motion to approve that with as corrected?
So moved.
Jean,
Yep, so moved.
seconded by Cindy.
Second.
Second, thank you. And all in favor? Aye. And then we have the April 13th meeting. And as you know, that was sent around. There was one correction to those minutes, which pertained to our budget work, which was primarily what happened at our April 13th meeting. And so not noted in the original, but in those final minutes that were sent around by Terry this afternoon, it did include 3410-481, which we reduced an appropriation from 16,892 to 7,500. So is there a motion to accept the corrected minutes for April 13th?
So moved.
By McGuire and second by Jim. Thank you. That brings us to the zoning officials report. And as you know, the only meeting we really had this month
Ellen?
was,
Ellen, you need to
Yes.
do the vote.
I thought we did.
It was moved and seconded, but you didn't ask for a vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I said all in favor. I saw people's hands go up. All in favor? Yep, I've seen
Thank you.
hands go up. Thank you. The zoning officials report, again, the only meeting this month was the April 21st planning board. They met in order that they could have a recommendation, which they did on our proposed local law number 3, which was changing the zoning designation on the Walnut Street parcels. And that also went to county planning board. So as you all recall, we opened the public hearing for that zoning designation change at our March 23rd meeting. We also opened the public hearing for proposed local law number 2, which was to amend chapter 270 of the vehicle and traffic regulations to reflect stop signs omitted from regulations that currently exist in several locations of the village. This is really just a cleanup of our regulations. This wasn't establishing any additional stop signs. It was just noting the ones that are there and need to be recognized in our law, just so that they are official. So those 2 public hearings were opened. They were never closed. So I now officially close those 2 public hearings. Again, I will reiterate that for the one, we did receive email. We received no email correspondence on either one, actually. So I will begin with proposed local law number 3 of 2020. I'm sorry, number 2 of 2020, which was the changing of the, adding the stop signs that aren't currently in our vehicle and traffic regulations. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to add the stop signs to our regulations.
Made by Cindy, seconded by Jim, who's raising his hand. All in favor? All right, great. So that moves us on to the other local law, which we just closed the public hearing for, which was the proposed local law number 3 of 2020, change the zoning designation from commercial to residential for Walnut Street parcel tax map number 131.09-1-7, as well as changing portions of parcels designated as commercial on Linden Ave for tax map numbers 131.09-1-10 and 131.09-1-11 from to residential. Those are actually the 2 residential properties, which kind of unbeknownst to everyone had commercial on their back part of their property. So those have been changed or closed, and that is the law. So the first thing we need to do is complete seeker. And in your board packet, you all had the seeker filing, at least the forms. Part 1 was pretty much all completed. Did anyone see anything they wanted to change or alter on the 13 pages of part 1?
I have one change, I think, on page 3,
Mhm.
under C.3 zoning.
Yep.
Letter B, is the use permitted or allowed by special or conditional use permit? I think the answer to that is no.
Okay, yep. So we will make that change. Everyone say page 3 on part 1. All right. That change is made. Any others? No? Okay. Then part 2, we have also had in our packets. Hopefully you went through it and looked at it so that we don't have to kind of belabor this. I will note that question number 1, I will just tell you how I had filled it out. They were pretty much no's for question 1, impact on land. Number 2, impact on geological features. Number 3, impacts on surface water. Number 4, impact on groundwater. Number 5, impact on flooding, no. Impacts on air, number 6, no. 7, impact on plants and animals, no. 8, impact on agricultural resources, no. 9, impact on aesthetic resources, no. Number 10 is checked yes. I checked yes. Because of course we are in the Glimmerglass Historic District. Number 11, no. 12, no. 12 is impact on critical environmental areas. 13, impact on transportation, no. 14, impact on energy, no. 15, impact on noise, odor, and light, no. And 16, impact on human health, no. Were there any ones? And I'm sorry, 17, consistency with community plans, no. And 18, consistency with community character, no. There were no problems with that. So did anybody check anything differently that they'd like to discuss?
Only that under number 10 on page 6, A, B, and C would all be in the no to small category.
Oh, correct. I'm sorry. Yes, because that number 10, if you recall, impact on historic and archaeological resources. That one we have to check yes. We are in the Glimmerglass Historic District, but it is all no or small impact. Anything else? All right. So that brings us to part 3. really, this is a type 1 action, which is on the bottom. And there really were the only one, if you recall, that we checked yes, was the fact that we are in the Glimmerglass Historic District. So that is recognized. So this comment could be placed on this page if you're all in agreement. The property lies within the village of Cooperstown in the Glimmerglass Historic District. This action has no physical impact on the environment, physical or environmental impact. Is that fairly good wording? Would you like to see a change on that, Cindy? Oh, I'm sorry.
I believe that's fine. Sorry, my dogs are not behaving, so I'm keeping it on mute.
Okay, all right. All right, so if that's the case, then we would turn the page and it would be checked, A, this project will result in no significant adverse impacts on the environment and therefore an environmental impact statement need not be prepared. Accordingly, this negative declaration is issued. Is there a motion? I'd like the wording. Cindy, do you want to do the wording? Or Richard, whoever?
You can do it, Richard.
Richard, we can't hear you. Richard, we can't hear you.
Sorry. Move to approve proposed local law number 3 of 2020, change zoning designation from commercial to residential for Walnut Street parcel map, tax map number 131.09-1-7.00, change portions of parcels designated as commercial on Linden Avenue for tax map number 131.09-1-10.00 and 131.09-1-11.00 to residential and amend village zoning maps accordingly.
Okay, we'll let that motion, because it was just made, stand. Is there a second for that motion from
Second.
Mac? Mac, are you seconding? Okay, but what I was looking for was a motion on the seeker we just completed. Cindy, would you like to make that, please?
Yeah, so I'll make a motion for the purposes of seeker that we check box A, this project will result in no significant adverse impacts on the environment and therefore an environmental impact statement need not be prepared. Accordingly, this negative declaration is issued.
Thank you, Cindy. That's the motion. Is there a second? By Mac. All in favor? Okay, so we now have a motion on the made and seconded. I just want to note that we do have from the Otsego County Planning Department, they were supported this change, as did the village's planning board. I know if you all read the planning board minutes that there was some discussion and debate about it. I think it's important to recognize at this time that the issues, the commercial development of that parcel of property came up over 30 years ago initially, and really could have been addressed by any of the intervening boards, but it's sort of fallen to us. More recently, it developed a bit of a hue and an outcry with an additional potential for commercial development. It's a bit of an anomaly, that commercial space, because it runs off the railroad tracks. And as I say, there are 2 residential properties on Linden Ave with houses that one was totally unaware that their backyard was zoned commercial. So it would have been an unusable landlocked commercial spot. So it is important to remedy this. There was one concern that we were affecting somehow the value of the property by this zoning change. I think that past history, since everyone has been pretty much on this board, at Walnut Street or at Delaware, we know that residential property can be sold quickly and a house torn down on it and still a house built. So in some ways, I think this property will have greater value to everyone as a residential property, particularly in proximity to the school. So that said, anybody else want to say anything about this law change? No? All right, the motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. Okay, moving on. Is it 7? Not 7 yet. May we have the, we'll start to go through finance, Joe, if that's all right. The treasurer's report attached to packets.
So in your packet, we have the LoSAP statement for your review, and the portfolio review for the public who may be interested in having a look at it is also available in the treasurer's office. We have the bank reconciliations. Again, I think we have done those. And we have a sales tax report from the county, which shows the comparison between last year by month with this year. We're up a little bit for the month, but I think the coming months are going to show a change. We'll wait and see for that. And then we have an action item number 5 on this finance agenda. We have an insurance premium plan document for our approval, and I make a motion that we that the board approve this this premium plan document.
Motion made by Joe, seconded by Jim, I think. Yep. Is there any, is the amount, what is the amount, 300? What is it? So that can go in the motion?
Let me get that out. If you have it, someone has it handy, because
It's the 300.
It is the 300. Okay, so the motion's for the 300. Motion made, seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you.
And then on item number 6 for Doubleday Field, we had a request to approve a non-budgeted item, a piece of machinery, a gator for $8,800, which we are proposing to remove from the 2021 budget.
All right, so
And
do you want to discuss it, or what did you make a motion, Joe?
I will invite the motion to remove that from the budget. I'll make the motion. And
Seconded.
is there a discussion? Mitch, do you want to?
The budget really,
required?
we're gonna talk about the budget later. So are you saying that you essentially want to ensure that it's removed from the budget before we authorize a this year purchase?
As in conferring just a little earlier with Terry, I thought that was what we wanted to do.
Okay, is that what you recommend, Terry? That we,
Well, I mean, that the other motion can be taken care of during the budget, but this is like proposed to be bought out of the current year budget now in
Right.
anticipation of it being removed next year.
okay,
So this will be, to be clear, this will be a current fiscal year expenditure.
Correct.
correct. And I know Quentin in his request to purchase a non-budgeted item in this year did put down exactly which funds, and we kind of double checked those, and certainly they have adequate funds at this time. So I would actually like to have a motion to approve this, and if we do, then it's almost a fait accompli that we will be pulling that from the budget, which is going to be resolved under new business.
Like that,
So go ahead, Cindy.
I'm sorry, Cindy.
yeah, I will make that motion for the point
Okay,
of discussion.
made by Cindy, seconded by Joe. All right, so now let's discuss if we do want to allow this purchase using this year's, meaning 2019, 2020 funds. from those 3 accounts as stipulated on the form.
I would like to hear from Mitch, what this is used for and what the state of the current piece of equipment is. Quentin mentioned significant repairs, but it's hard for me to judge exactly what those entail.
Quentin uses this for multiple things around the ball field, and even in the wintertime, we will utilize it from time to time. As far as what repairs it needs, I don't know specifically. I didn't get into detail with him about that, but he knows that it's going to be potentially going to be pulled from the upcoming budget, and he was hoping to do it with what finances he has now.
Mac, were you?
So, yeah, Quentin says there's significant repairs on it. I would love to have numbers, but we don't. And if we're looking for a decision now, I think that in a long-term investment, if it needs significant repairs, you can probably count on $1,000 or $2,000. I mean, on a piece of machinery like that, if they're significant. So if the money's there now to do it, then I don't see why we shouldn't.
Any other,
Yeah,
Joe?
I would, what's coming up, of course, is our very difficult budgeting process. If we did not spend this money this year, that $8,000 would roll over into our surplus.
Correct.
So that, I don't know if we want to, we're going to be making a lot of hard decisions, but do we want to keep that as an item to decide at the end of our budget process tonight, if we feel we need that money, or I have no good answers. It just seems to me that as we're about to jump into this discussion, we're taking $8,000 or $8,800 off the table.
Okay, Richard?
What do we exactly need this for right now? I mean, what is it going to give us that we don't already have? What capabilities?
Mitch, would you be able to respond to that?
There is really no difference. I mean, we've been using this piece of machinery for ever since I've been at the village. We've had one of these pieces of equipment. It's used for multiple things around the ball field. We will utilize it on the streets during winter time. You know, it's, I don't know what you're looking for.
So basically what you're saying is it's simply to replace a piece of equipment that we have now that is necessary.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mitch, could you tell us what year that one that we have now is? And, you know, maybe over the past year or so, do you know of any repairs it's had?
I do not know of the current year of what it is. I would have to guess it's a 2015, so it's 5 years old.
And is there any other questions? Oh, wait, Jim?
Yeah, it's a little bit toughy. I mean, we might have some other things coming up later we want to talk about. If a new one's $8,800 and the repair is $1,500, under the current circumstances, I'd be inclined to go for a repair and see how it works out. $8,800 is a fair amount of money. That's probably not terribly high on the list, but depends upon which department you're in. But I think we should think about it.
All right. And Joe, I saw Joe. I'm sorry, Matt.
Yeah, I was just going to add from the questions that came up from board members earlier, I think it's important when we're going to justify a purchase like this that we have some of the background information. This isn't a criticism of anybody, but we're kind of caught, and because of the Zoom situation, we're caught flat-footed on what the state of the machine is, what the repair history is, what we're looking at in the future. Don't want to deprive anyone of the equipment we need. It's just, this is a tough time.
Okay. And Mac, I'm sorry.
That's all right. I was just going to ask Mitch. It sounds like that we would maybe revisit this at the end of the meeting when we're talking about budgeting stuff. But if you happen to be able to find out from Quentin what the significant repairs are, that would help me make a clearer decision at the end of the meeting.
Yeah, I'll reach out to Quentin right now, and I'll figure something out.
Great. So why don't we, Joe, just set this aside for now, and when we're looking at the budget, we'll make a decision and go on with your the treasurers, the finance.
Joe, you're muted.
No, we can't hear you.
I say we have the overtime analysis and leave analysis items in your packet for review. And the last action item we have is the abstract and transfers, which I would move we approve.
Joe made the motion, seconded by Mac. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. All right. Okay, so now it's 7 o'clock. So let's go back and open the public hearing for proposed local law number 4 of 2020, amend the vehicle and traffic regulations to amend parking on Walnut Street. Hopefully you all have your documents on this. As noted at the beginning of the meeting, we've received email correspondence from Brian Hubble and Betsy J with modifications or overall not supporting this proposed local law. We received emails from Jim and Barb Tung in support, and Peter Regan and Aviva Schneider in support. So there have been no other, right, emails, Terry, that's it?
Yes, that's it.
Sorry. Okay. So this has been out there for some time. Obviously, we did receive quite a bit of email communication on it. Cindy, as streets chair, would you mind, I know you did great maps, etc. with this, and I know there've been some recommendations for reducing some of the parking a bit more. Would you like to go through this for the board?
Yeah, this has been a multi-month process, you may recall at this point. When we first looked at it back in February, the proposal at that point in time was to go to 2-hour parking on portions of Walnut Street where parking was permitted. That was a proposal that was decidedly not favored by much of anyone for a variety of reasons. Although I think, thinking about the effect that we want here is to avoid a string of cars that is lined up from Susquehanna to Delaware, particularly during the workday, that makes it very difficult to transverse that street. So, 2-hour parking may have done that, but it didn't serve anyone else's goals. We've worked through this with our various alternative meeting strategies for the past 2 months. And, as has been pointed out, we have 3 people in favor, 2 opposed, but I think it's important to note the 2 opposed are opposed for opposite reasons. So, one would like to see further restrictions in terms of where no parking is allowed and the hours when parking would be prohibited. And the other would like to see no further restrictions at all, and has in fact suggested that one way to keep parking on this street would be to go to a one-way roadway. In my opinion, one way is not an appropriate solution here, given the fact that this street is used to access the school, Linden Avenue, Price Chopper. That would mean people coming from the Middlefield Center, Murphy Hill, Gym direction would need to go up to Beaver, go around the block to access all those places, which I don't think is a realistic solution. That said, I think the goal of this was to continue to allow residents and others to park on the street for periods of time, which is what just limiting to those limiting no parking to the morning and late afternoon hours would in fact do. I will say if we pass this tonight, we need to do it with the understanding that in addition to the added items that are listed on this sheet, we also need to include a series of deletions that take out the current rules from the law so that we don't end up with a law that has what we want as well as what that was replacing. It's just the way our general code process works.
Okay, are there, why don't we begin with a motion to approve proposed local, did I close the public hearing? That's a good question. I don't think I did I?
I don't
All
think
right.
so.
Motion to close the public hearing for proposed local law number 4 by
Second.
McGuire.
Yeah, I'll
Okay.
make that.
Thank you. And second by Jean. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. So, so that we can discuss this and maybe some of the emails we've received on it, would someone like to make a motion to adopt proposed local law number 4, 2020, amending the traffic and vehicle regulations on Walnut?
I have something I'd like to say.
I was just looking for a motion and then maybe we can discuss it or, okay. So
So moved.
motion by Rich. Thank you, Rich. Second? By
Second.
Cindy, all in favor?
No, I want to
Oh,
discuss.
wait, I'm sorry. You were just doing the what?
You said move it and then
We'll
we
discuss it. Yep. Jim? I can't hear you.
Should I-
So for discussion at this point, yes?
Yep.
I just want to express some support for Betsy's J's concern that she would like 1 to 2 parking spaces removed in front of her house. And it doesn't seem unreasonable. And so anyway, I wanted to pass that along.
And that's exactly the same thing I wanted to say. I'd like to support Betsy's request to remove at least 1 parking spot that makes it difficult for her to get in. She is disabled. It is a problem. And I believe if we do it, it would cost us exactly 1 parking spot.
I think it's actually much more than that. Well,
Yeah.
not much more than that, but more than that, because that would mean unless we're going to have no parking, and then no parking, it means we need to eliminate all the parking in front of 1, 3, and 5 Walnut Street to get where she is suggesting that we be.
Cindy, how many spaces are in front of 3?
Let me look online to give you an answer to that.
Which house is 3?
3 is Hogan, and basically, if you read the law or looked at the area, it's from Hogan's, correct me if I'm wrong, Cindy, Hogan's driveway east, that there is no parking?
Yes, currently the parking would be prohibited from the west side of Hogan's driveway to Susquehanna.
Which would result in losing 3 spaces.
Is there consider an alternative, making that 1 spot that Betsy's concerned about? I mean, this would require a different motion, a handicap spot.
I would simply suggest that the curb be painted yellow on either side of her driveway.
All right.
That is in our law now. You know, that they can paint that.
So currently there are 2 parking spaces in front of number 1 Walnut, which would both be eliminated. 1 between 1 and 3, which would be eliminated. So right now what we're proposing eliminates 3 parking spaces. If we were to go further and eliminate all the parking spaces to 5 Walnut, that would be 3 more spaces. If we wanted to go beyond that and do 1 more, that would be 4 spaces. So that would be eliminating 7 parking spaces to go all the way to the west side of 5 Walnuts driveway.
Thank you, Cindy. Is there more discussion? I'm sorry, Mac, would you,
No, sorry, reconsidered.
okay. Right, Jim,
So are we being presented with a choice of either remove 7 or remove none? Is that what we're being asked to decide?
no, Cindy, would you go over that again?
Yeah, what is on the piece of paper eliminates are 3 parking spaces, starting at Susquehanna and moving to the driveway for 3 Walnut Street. So that would be a loss of 3 parking spaces, and would ensure that as people came to the end of the road, we had ample room for 2 lanes of traffic. What this email from Betsy J suggests is eliminating the parking spaces up to and beyond her driveway, which would be an elimination of 4 additional spaces. So the 3 that are proposed and 4 more.
She seemed to indicate it would eliminate 1 to 2, but maybe I'm misunderstanding what she was saying and the reality of the situation.
I think there may have been some confusion about the map, yes.
Any other discussion?
I think 7's probably too much. That's a lot to take away. But if she's having an issue getting in and out of her driveway, and if she's faced with disability, we should probably do something. But maybe Mitch, somebody, if we have the staff to do it, could paint the curb, give her a little extra space getting out of her driveway. Is that possible?
Cindy, as streets chair, would you like to comment?
I mean, traditionally, sorry, I'm looking at my map and I've made you all small. Traditionally, one can do their own yellow paint. Alternatively, they can pay the village to do. That's the way that law reads. That said, we're gonna have to restripe in this area, so I suppose there is the potential for doing it when we restripe.
Okay, I mean, if somebody wants to follow up on that, I mean, I think it's a good idea. If it's in the law that she can do it on her own, but I mean, you know, if we can help her out and do that while we're doing work in that vicinity, I think that would be a fine thing to do.
Joe?
But it seems to me that the striping or the painting the yellow, painting the curb yellow is to alert people not to encroach on the driveway space. But the idea of doing more than that to eliminate more parking spaces, I mean, there were comments that came in, at least some that were, I got a call concerned about the elimination of too many spaces. So I think what we have is an equitable outcome. And I think if we do the striping, or the owner and someone can help with it, has the right to do that, I think that's probably what is in the public interest overall.
I was getting feedback, so I muted myself. Sorry. Is there any other comment? No? All right. So the motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor of approving the Walnut Street parking regulation as proposed in local law number 4, please say aye or raise your hand. Okay. Thank you. Okay.
I just have one suggestion. After the fact, maybe we can sort of brainstorm a little bit and see what we can do for Betsy, if anything, to ameliorate her impairment, her accessibility issue.
Mhm.
Okay,
Certainly.
thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
I just want to make sure if we need to make another motion, we can do it to ensure that the deletions are part of that motion as well.
I'd make that motion, Cindy.
I'd like to make a motion that the deletions of the current regulations regarding parking on Walnut Street take place in order to avoid confusion with the new local law.
All right, so motion made, seconded by Mac. All in favor? Aye. All right, thank you. Okay, I think at this point, Terry, we may be up to the administrator's report.
Okay, so wastewater treatment, the construction continues. The pay apps were put in for review and were reviewed by Joe and Ellen when they came in to review invoices and have been submitted. The project completion for TEP is still set for May 15th. We did receive reimbursement number 13 from DOT in the amount of $253,944.09. And the pay application number, I believe it was 9, was emailed out today as we just received that from the contractor and had the engineers sign off on that. So if we could get a motion to approve that.
So it's a motion to pay Upstate $63,384.68. Someone want to make that motion? Cindy, seconded by Joe. All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Okay, Doubleday project, that construction is continuing. You see the pay apps and invoices that have been submitted for March. William H. Keller, $123,950.47. Stillseen Electric, $46,946.37. Smith Site Development, $69,495.98. SJB Inspection and Testing, $2,580, and William H. Lane Construction Management, $30,500. These did come in after invoices were reviewed, so we also need a motion on that.
Those are the 5 invoices. Motion by Joe,
Second.
second by Mac. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and there is one change order that so far has not been approved, and that's for asphalt paving on the south side of the stadium. That was included in your packet. It's for $8,564, so that needs approval.
Just in
Can I
case there are any, just in case you have any questions. The reason this sort of came up is, if you recall, this is a big double-day project. We ultimately have done it in phases. Phase 1 being the parking lot and the entrance and the roadway. Phase 2, the grandstand. Phase 3, hopefully, will ultimately be the third base bleachers and building. So because the whole project wasn't done at one time, theoretically, that blacktop that's kind of on the east side of the grandstand would have been in the third base building project. So what we have now is a situation where that's not gone forward, and we have dirt. We'll be going from our nice new brick pavers to something that is not stable and secure. So it was just an additional amount for the contractor Keller, who is doing the parking lot paving, to jump over and do that section as well to secure it for the summer. Richard?
I don't understand the pricing on this. We have a labor, we have an equipment, we have a material, and then we have a subcontractor fee of about almost 50%. What does that subcontractor fee actually cover?
That's Terry or Mitch. It's pretty standard. That's who Keller is utilizing, right?
If I had to guess, the subcontractor fee is the company that is actually doing the paving work.
Correct.
I don't understand. Okay, so there's a company doing the paving work that they're paying for $4,014 for. What is the additional labor, equipment, and material? Okay, material I could see, equipment I could see. What's the additional labor fee for?
That would be Keller doing the prep work for the paving.
Okay, thank you. That's the answer.
Okay, so that's the background on it. Is there a motion to approve the change order in the amount of 8,564
So
I'll
moved.
make a motion.
by Richard, second by
Second.
Mac? All in favor? Aye.
Okay, just an update on village election. It still is under postponement until at least after June 1st. I did participate in an NICOM webinar. There really is no additional information yet until the governor makes a decision when that date for the election is going to be held. Doubleday field games are canceled at this point, at least through May 15th, due to the executive orders being in place at least through that date. We're gonna, again, that's another wait and see if things are extended or not. We still are under 50% reduction in staff as ordered by the governor, which continues through May 15th because that was extended as well. And I just want to mention that Kyle Fabiano, our IT assistant, has been wonderful in assisting the village with the setup of the Zoom meetings for meetings that we are required to have that are essential to keep the village running.
Thank you, Terry. Are there any questions for Terry? Richard?
Regarding the May 15th date, I mean, I've been following the very carefully the information about the governor's planned phased opening. Neither phase 1 nor phase 2 would allow for reopening Doubleday Field for destination tourism. And then after phase 2, there's a 2-week break before phase 3. So that puts us, I think, a minimum of July 1st.
Okay.
Well, I mean, like I said, we're gonna have to wait and see. I mean, I fully expect those kind of activities to be extended, but until we get something that extends it beyond that point, that's where things are officially under executive orders right now.
So really, that will be what we must consider in our budget, Richard, for revenue, et cetera. So anything else? Thank you, Terry, for the administrator's report. That now brings us to our new business, at which point we are going to be reviewing our 2020-21 budget for additional changes. At our April 13th meeting, as noted in summary to all of you, we did reduce our revenues by 101,900, and we also decreased our appropriations or expenditures by a net of 317,827. But we left on the agenda for tonight some of the big ones, some of the ones that we knew we needed maybe a little more information on, and that could be significant cuts to our revenue. So as we did when we were working on our budget, and as we did on April 13th when we were revising it, I'd like to sort of begin right at the beginning on page 3, which is our revenues. And, you know, we've all been looking at this again for a couple weeks. I know that right off the top, we, on page 3, under departmental income, we need to look at parking lots and garage fees. That's essentially our paid parking revenue. Cindy did a great job of sending around some additional information for everyone to look at, with a breakdown by week of both our on-street and our Doubleday Field. She also provided, you know, 2014 figures, at which point we weren't extending the on-street for certain periods of the year, to also get an idea of, you know, what we were looking at. So Cindy, would you like to lead the discussion on where you see that budget figure being?
Yeah, in your packets, this time was a new chart that I didn't include last time. Last time was just, figures that we've had in the past. This time I tried to put together some scenarios for a low impact, a medium impact, and a high impact in terms of percentages we might be able to expect, keeping in mind that as we're thinking about the season through August, we will not have Dreams Parkers regardless of what scenario we follow, which will significantly reduce the number of people in Cooperstown. The percentages and descriptions, I will admit, I did not completely make up. The American Alliance of Museums has started to put together this type of scenario planning for museums, and being that much of our paid parking is based on the Hall of Fame attendance, I thought that was as good a measure as any to start thinking about what the effect might be on us. So the low suggests that we continue social distancing through the summer, but that we begin to get back to whatever the new normal is. The medium suggests that there continue to be hotspots throughout the summer and that travel restrictions, basically travel is strongly discouraged. And then the high impact is the worst case scenario where every time something starts to open up, there are resurgences that continue not only to prevent travel, but to keep people in their homes as we are now. Hindsight is 2020, and we will all be able to look back at this on the other side of it and know which, if any, of these scenarios is correct. I am inclined personally to go with the middle one, which would have a Doubleday Field revenue stream of about 50,000, and then street stream, depending on when we decide, if we decide we want to start Memorial Day weekend, or if we want to wait till the beginning of July to start on street. I'm looking at a figure that's maybe about 100,000. I think we could end up above that. We probably will end up below that, but 100 seems a good number to me to start the discussion with.
Okay, Richard.
I agree with you completely on that 100,000. I'm a little bit more pessimistic, but I tend to be more pessimistic. But I think that's a reasonable expectation of parking fees. I'm also totally against changing the time frame of parking. I don't think it has any bearing on when people come or don't come or how they're going to come this year. I also think we shouldn't start opening up a can of worms by, for some reason, suggesting not to do it. The only reason I would not collect parking, and before, say, July 4th, would be because of the problem of using the parking meters and requiring keeping them clean between use. That's the only reason I would consider decreasing the parking fees, but not for no other purpose.
Is there any other discussion on this? Mac?
100,000 is realistic. I think that's a huge punch in the gut for us. I know last time we had discussed about the parking meters being an issue. If we're going to do paid parking, we have to enforce it. So there'll be an enforcement officer out, and I wanted to circle back to that discussion about part of the responsibilities of that employee being, as they go up and down Main Street, sanitizing the parking meters so that there's that level of sanitation, but also comfort for people who want to park on our streets and need to use the machine to pay for it. So I just want that to be part of the discussion too, because I think that even canceling paid parking till July 1st is, I don't think it's the way to go. I think we need to continue on with paid parking without changing the timing of it, while adding in that additional stipulation that the enforcement officer is sanitizing those parking meters as they go. Thank you.
I think that if that is the way forward, that we say we don't change and we begin a memorial, I would have said that I'm a little more inclined to not begin it until July 1st. But I think what we have to recognize, it would probably have to be an additional individual, that our parking enforcement officer has a great deal more to do than just Main Street and our paid parking areas. Predominantly, our greatest parking ticket fine revenue comes from River Street, Upper Pioneer Street, places near Bassett where employees literally will rack up $2,000 in tickets because they prefer to park so they can see their car. That is the truth. So the idea that our parking enforcement officer only goes up and down Main Street, I mean, certainly if this is, the vote of the board is to begin paid parking on Memorial Weekend, I think we need to look at some sort of staffing to do that. But I don't know as it should be a higher paid parking enforcement officer. Jim.
I'm inclined to start a little bit later to see what actually happens on Main Street on Memorial Day weekend and the week or two after that. We don't really know what's going to happen at all. And I think if we gave ourselves a couple of weeks or so to reassess based upon what's happening on the street, it might help us out. I wouldn't rush to open up paid parking too soon and then maybe possibly regret it a little bit.
Cindy, I know based on your figures and your, low, medium, and high impact, that really the 100,000 figure comes with starting on street at July 1. So maybe the first thing we need to do is sort of have a consensus or a vote of the board on the paid parking start, and then go on with the budget, because that's the one, that's really going to need a kind of a decision here.
Yeah, I would agree. And my feeling is that we should start July 1st. And I say that in part because during that initial reopening phase, I don't think that we are seeing non-locals come to Main Street. In fact, we hope we're not seeing extensive number of non-locals come to Main Street. So our locals buy parking permits. They will still, I believe, buy parking permits because they know paid parking is going to be in effect in July and in August. But to think that there's going to be a significant number of people coming from outside our region to use those parking meters, I think is I won't even say wishful thinking, because I don't think it's what any of us wish at this point in time. So my inclination is to start a little later. I did talk to ATI. They are willing to credit us for the back end fee if we decide not to do June. It's not a lot of money. It's about $680, but they're willing to credit us that, knowing that we won't be using the communications on those. And then I think we have the need to clean as many as 3 meters in the Doubleday Field parking lot. Maybe we just do 1 meter in the Doubleday Field parking lot to handle that whole parking lot. And everybody gets to get a little more comfortable with what the new normal is.
Joe.
3 points that I would make. Number one, first on your analysis, Cindy, I noticed that while we have a high, medium, and low, the difference between a high and the medium and the low is quite different. I'm counting $60,000 difference between high and medium and $17,000 between medium and low. Is that just the way the numbers fall? That doesn't seem to make sense to me intuitively, but that was...
I think it's because the percentages in the low get higher in the fall, but we don't have high numbers in the fall. So for instance, you can see in that low scenario, things continue to improve and improve, and we're up to 80% of where we were by October.
Mm-hmm.
Weren't very high in October. October was not akin to August.
Okay, thanks for that. The question of cleaning, if we go to a post box on the street and pull the handle and drop a letter in, we're either cleaning that or we're not cleaning that. I'm a little concerned about assuming that we have an obligation or a responsibility to be cleaning the parking meters. I think everyone is going to know their own protocols, or know what the protocol is, and be careful with that. So I don't want to associate when we start or whether we start with the cleaning of the machines. And the third point I would make is that I'm in favor of keeping the start and stop dates as we have had them. Your point triggered something for me, Cindy, about the people who are buying parking passes for the summer will have devalued their investment by, why wouldn't they say, well, give me a discount and prorate the cost of my parking fee because I could have free parking anyway until July 1. So, I mean, I think there are too many moving parts to adjusting our parking regimen. I would prefer to stay with it because I don't really believe that's going to have an effect on visitorship, and people are attuned to what we've been doing, and I think it just avoids complicating everybody's understanding of our parking regimen.
Cindy, do you want to just remind people what Fowler Lot and allows with the parking permit?
Yeah, so a parking permit currently gets you 3 things. I think what right now we're focusing on is the fact that it gets you on a daily basis 2 hours of free or permit parking on Main Street. But a parking permit also allows you to park in the Fowler Way lot all day, but not overnight. So if you're a day user, that's how you are able to park in the downtown area during the day by buying that permit. It also allows you, and this is perhaps less important except for folks who live downtown, after 4 p.m., you can park in the Doubleday Field parking lot without having to feed the meter. So that permit does 3 different things depending on the type of use that one desires.
That's why I don't think it really kind of is as devalued as you might think, Joe. That I just wanted that reiterated. Is there any other discussion or thoughts? Jean, I'm sorry, I saw Jean.
I agree with going with the medium 100,000 value. And I also agree that we shouldn't really take on the responsibility of cleaning the meters. I think, as Joe pointed out, I mean, wherever you go, opening a door, opening whatever, people need to take responsibility for carrying hand sanitizer, etc.
Okay. And do you have any thoughts, Jean, on the time?
I think keeping it as it is, as it's always been, is not a bad idea. I think it's true that it'll probably mostly be local people who tend to buy permits anyway. I just think it'll be less confusing if we stick to what we've been doing.
Yeah.
Richard? I'm sorry, I saw Richard Mack. I'll be back.
I'd like to make 2 separate motions. Motion number 1, that we agree that the expected income will be $100,000 from parking this year. Motion number 2 is to open the meters as normally on Memorial Day.
Okay, but we can take a second on that, but I think there's some other people who want some discussion, and that's fine. Is there a second? It was seconded by Joe. Mac, you wanted to speak?
Sorry, I just wanted to agree with Jean's point to the confusion. I mean, I think it's easy to leave it that way. On the local end of things, you know, I know a lot of people coming to town, but they're buying parking permits, so they're gonna park with leisure regardless. But I think that you know, and I certainly hope that everyone takes the time that we need after, you know, this lockdown is lifted, you know, to slowly get back into, as Cindy said, the new normal. But we're facing, you know, significant revenue shortfalls and a bit of a nationwide economic crisis. So I think that keeping paid parking the way it is, and assuming whatever revenue comes in from that time is a positive thing. Just wanted to express that.
Okay, Cindy?
We are then going to have to figure out how our office, in its relatively closed state, except by appointment, sells potentially 1,000 parking permits in the month of March.
May.
Sorry, May.
May. Rich or Jim?
So did Cindy say the village has sold 1,000 permits in the month of March?
I said March, I meant May. But if we go forward with a Memorial Day start, we will sell hundreds up to 1,000 parking permits before that season starts based on past usage, correct, Terry?
I mean, yes, if people came in as they normally would. I'm not sure that'll happen right now. People that have purchased in the last few weeks have done it through the mail. So, I mean, that could be something that could be placed in Village Voices as well. But, you know, we have been doing it through the mail. I mean, I'm here, so, you know, if people do need to stop down, that we could make arrangements for that as well.
Terry, if I could ask a question.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yes.
So by mail, are they mailing you a form? And if not, is it being done digitally? Can it be done digitally? You know, people apply online, you stick one in the mail it to them. It avoids the in-person contact in the offices.
Well, I mean, they're downloading the form now and sending it in with payment. We don't have a way to accept payment, you know. They either have to come in to use their credit card or send a check. So that's the way it works right now. But they can send it in with a check and then we send it out to them.
Got it. Okay. I don't know if this is the time to expand on that, but I would be interested in doing so if we want.
Jim, were you waiting to say something?
Yeah, I was just, I would kind of expect fewer sales of parking permits for a number of reasons, including some people may not have the money for them. I'm wondering about that. And the other part of it is that the village of Cooperstown Main Street may be depending more upon the local area people to come to town without a parking permit, who would be more inclined to do so if there wasn't paid parking, just even for 1 month or so. So I think we've got some unknowns here that we're going to find out as we go along.
Okay, any more discussion? So right now there is a motion and a second to, two motions actually. We can take them individually, might be easier. The first one is to make no changes to our on-street paid parking and to begin it on Memorial Day weekend as we normally do. So that is now the motion before you. All those in favor of that, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 All right, so that's 4. And those opposed, that's 3. So the motion does carry to begin it on Memorial Weekend. The other motion was to, what was your other one? Was it to put it at 100,000?
For the purposes of, for the purposes of budgeting, to assume a total income of 100,000 from paid parking.
Okay, that doesn't really need a motion because, you know, if we're all in concurrence, we're going to be making all these decisions.
That's fine. But I just wanted to get that part of this thing down out of the way.
Thank you. So we concur. We're now the only thing I will say is I had also in my draft notes put in 100,000. But what you have to remember is that figure that we had in our original March tentative was 463,500. That included 24,000 in credit card fees. So is there a sense, Cindy, I kind of did divided by a quarter since we're dropping to 100,000. Do you think it would be about 6,000? I mean, do you have a sense of what we can put in there for a credit card fee?
It's about 5%. So
Okay.
I would go with 5,000.
105,000 is the new budget line there.
Oh,
Which-
yes, but we still need to make that motion to set the,
Right. Right. We can do that. Shall we just go through this first, though?
yeah,
Is that good?
absolutely.
So let me just do that math quickly. So we're taking 105 out. So we're at, that just cut 358. Is that correct from revenues? 350 for the, you know, it'd make it easier on me if we did 105,500. Does that sound good?
We can do that.
Thank you.
May I ask a question? I'm sorry, I'm confused.
So, mhm.
We are going from anticipated revenue of 463,500
Mhm.
down to 105,000.
Correct.
Okay.
And
I thought it was a
105.5, correct.
Right, I thought you were taking 100. Okay. Gotcha.
What I was trying to do, and maybe that wasn't clear, and I apologize. So we have just removed $358,000 from our revenue. That is what I was trying to arrive at. So I have a running tally here. Okay, there we go. All right. Moving on, the next one was stocks that had been mentioned as one to discuss. I would like to point out that on this new tentative number 2, you will see that as of 4/14/2020, we hit our budgeted goal for 2019-20. We may be optimistic. We had
I'm sorry,
budgeted.
Ellen, what line number?
So we're on still page 3. We are like 3 lines down from parking lots, culture and recreation, 2001-000, recreational charges -docks.
Great, thank you.
We, so you will look at 4/14/2020, we have in 40,325, and actually our other revenue and expenditures that you would have gotten in your packet had a total of 41,025. So we hit our 19-20 budget. So how do we feel about next year?
I think we leave this as is because we're talking about summer of 2021.
Okay, that was my feeling as well. All right, so we're leaving that one at 50. The other one we had talked about potentially reducing in our revenues is in that same cultural and recreation line on page 3, the last entry, A 2025-000 beach fees. We had budgeted tentatively 11,000. I was looking at, I thought perhaps looking back at prior years and knowing this is going to be a unique year, I was looking at 7,500. Did anyone else have thoughts? Richard?
That comes from basically tourists, and I don't think we're going to have tourists. I would decrease it at no more than $2,500.
Okay, is there a feeling
Ellen.
on that? Mac?
This number, so the from the docks, that's for summer 2021. The beach fees, though, that's coming from this summer. That's what we're talking about.
Correct.
Okay.
Because
Okay,
think
got
about it, most people have paid their dock fees like in March, or isn't that about when it goes out, Terry, or?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
got it.
Have done it in advance. Okay. The only reason I might think that the beach fees, it's not all tourists, Richard. If you're not a village resident, or for Ferry Spring, a town of Middlefield resident, or for town of Otsego, or for 3 Mile, a town of Otsego resident, you're paying to go in there.
And I agree with you, Ellen. That's why I'm not bringing it down closer to zero. But let's face it, town of Otsego residents, if they're going to come to our beach, are going to go to 3 Mile. Middlefield residents are going to go to, if they're going to come to our beaches, are going to go to Ferry Spring. People from elsewhere, if they're going to come this far, they're probably going to go to Glimmerglass, which quite frankly has much better accommodations and is about the same cost per carload. So I really don't think we're going to bring very much money in at all. And I think it's got to reflect the same amount of discount that we've taken on the parking fees.
Okay, so is everyone good with 2,500? Jean,
I would have said split it in half, more like,
Yes, agree.
5,500.
I think people are gonna really wanna be at our parks. And they'll be willing
Totally
to pay
agree.
for it.
All right,
Yep.
so is there a consensus? I hear 5,500. I'd be inclined to do 5,500 as well.
I'm
There-
comfortable with that.
Others?
That's good.
Jim,
Good.
okay, I think we kind of concurred. So that is 5,500. We have reduced it to and saved or removed from the revenue. Okay, moving on. I had nothing else on page 3. Did anyone else? Page 4. Right off the bat, we have on the about a third of the way down, licenses and permits. We do have a 2591 parking permits. Now, that I think is one, much like our pay parking, we're needing to reduce. Is there a sense?
I think we need to reduce, but I don't think we need to reduce as drastically.
Mhm.
Because, you know, that's largely local and regional folks who are buying the permits.
Right. I had said posited maybe 20,000, removing 6,000 from it. Is that overly
I'll
optimistic?
support
or-
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we do need to keep in mind that some of this sale comes in May. So some of this figure, we're again talking about 2021.
Mhm. Yep. And as of 4/14, you're seeing that we were at 8,620 for that one.
Yeah, and not much of that is for the 2020 permits.
Yeah.
I'm fine with accepting 20,000 on this.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. All right, next one was in that same category of licenses and permits. The last one, a 2597 vending permits. That's a little harder because we don't know
Yeah.
what's going to be here this summer. It definitely needs reducing. Do we go to 3,000?
3,000 is good.
Jim?
The other issue, you're talking about sidewalk vending, yes?
Yes, well, it's also, you know, one of the big times is probably induction weekend. you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
the vendors.
yeah. The big issue with vending is this social distancing. Vending by nature is like everybody on top of each other. On the sidewalks, it's almost impossible to keep people apart. I didn't even see how vending can happen.
I have a flip side to that, and that is one local merchant has already asked me whether, given the need for social distancing, the village might allow vending at other times than we normally do, thinking that actually conducting sales outside provides more space and more air circulation than happens inside stores. And I don't know that we're ready to talk about that yet, but because we just don't know how this is all going to unfold. But I thought that was an interesting perspective that, you know, people may actually want to vend, as opposed, our local merchants may want to vend, because they see it as being a positive for public health.
Okay, so is everyone comfortable with the reduction to 3,000 in the budget, which is a reducing the revenue by 2? Yes, okay, moving on. We probably should look at fines and forfeited bails, which is basically parking, you know, revenue, fines, ticket fines. So I was looking at a major chop there.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, significant reduction.
All right. So you can see what we have as of 4/14. I would say that we probably shouldn't be much more than 60 or 65. Because if this has been a remarkable year. If you go back further, you can see that what our revenues were. We were usually well over 100,000. But we didn't have a parking enforcement officer for most of this year, for one thing. Most of the fall, springtime.
I'd almost take it down to 50.
Take it to 50? Is
I
that
agree.
50? All right, we're moving it to 50,000, which is 65 off. Okay. 65,000 removed from the budget. Okay, anything else anybody had here on page 4? Moving to page 5.
Ellen, just one. We, the Doubleday field fee of 2,500, that would have been in this fiscal year if we were going to have it. Is that why we're not looking at that? The Hall of Fame game fee, 2771.
Yeah, that basically, you know, we call it that in our budget to a degree. You know, I didn't get a definitive answer, but to a degree where we're impacted is, of course, if traditionally, the closing of Doubleday Field for about 4 or 5 days for the induction weekend. So in some ways it was for that, the use of Doubleday Field for the awards ceremony, etc. So that's a little unknown.
Well, actually, that should stay that way in the budget, because in 2021, we still will expect that number. The Hall of Fame game is in May.
Right.
So we're going to have a shortfall there that we're not going to earn it this year, but for next year's budget, that should stay in. As far as I understand, the Hall of Fame game is the May game. We're not talking about induction weekend.
Well, you know, what I'm saying is that the terminology in the budget has remained the same long after the game was separated from induction weekend. Don't forget that it used to always be one and the same.
Okay, I didn't know that.
All right, so we've left that. So we've now completed our revenues. I can give you that tally in a sec. Let's move into our appropriations. So page 6 at the very bottom, now that we have greatly reduced 1375-410, our credit card fees, now that we've greatly reduced our paid parking income, we said that we would only have a $5,000, correct?
Correct.
credit card fee. So that 24,000 has now gone to 5,000. So that is a $19,000 cut in expenditures. Is there anything else I missed there on page 6 anyone wants to discuss? Moving to page 7. I was looking at several things. One of them under law, obviously the personal expenses is our village attorney. The law other expenses tends to apply when we have litigation, et cetera, that's going to be more time consuming, additional court time, et cetera. If you look back in law other expenses, there really was only 1 year, and that happened to involve a very lengthy tax assessment case, multi-year tax assessment legal case. Generally, we don't tend to hit that. As of 4/14/2020, you'll note it was 0. As I understand it, there's no real litigation outstanding. For the sake of cuts, I would like to drop that figure. I had said to at least 10,000 just to have in reserve, which would be cutting 5,000 from expenditures. So moving it from 15,000 to 10 in the budget. Is there additional thoughts or discussion?
For me.
Good with everyone? Okay, so that becomes 10,000 for a 5,000 removal of expenditures. I didn't really have too much else on that page. Did anyone else?
Yeah, on my little, the email I circulated with things to consider, the 14/8/14/90/200, the item which appears in different line items, this purchase of the vehicle, the Ram 1500. Is that something that can be deferred?
Not completely.
So that's the vehicle that Mitch uses, and it's split between water, sewer, and general. It's taking about 5,500 from our general fund. If we weren't to purchase it, then the vehicle that we currently have is going to need new tires and going to need some other repairs to keep it street worthy. It's a 2016, but it's one of those vehicles that makes short little trips constantly.
Not only that, it doesn't have the same capability as the Ram.
Right. Yeah, this was an experiment on our part to try a smaller vehicle, and it does not necessarily serve the needs that
It didn't work well.
Yeah.
Well, I don't question that. Still, it's, I think, what, a total of about a $40,000 purchase when we cobble together all the different accounts it comes from. So it's a lot of money.
No, it's about 27,000.
27? I'll stand corrected. Total price.
Yes.
Okay.
Because you put I think it's about 8,200 from water and sewer, and then the rest of it would come from the DPW budget, which is not anywhere near 40,000. And I took 11,000 from reserves, which would be the trade-in value for the vehicle that I have currently, to offset the cost.
Okay, so is there anything else on page 7? Moving to page 8.
Ellen,
Yes, Matt.
sorry, just to clarify, we're leaving the vehicle in?
At the current time, unless there's a strong consensus, the water and sewer budgets are kind of separate, remember, from this A fund, and are obviously have the funds. And as Mitch pointed out, we have village equipment reserve for a lot of that money,
Okay, thank you.
but
Now, we only need one pickup truck for all three divisions, DPW, water and sewer, correct?
No, this is a pickup truck for myself, a pickup truck for the water department, and a pickup truck for the sewer department. So it's 3 vehicles.
And what's the total gonna come to for the 3 vehicles?
For the 3 vehicles?
Hmm.
Well, I think
We're only talking about one vehicle, right?
right now, we're talking about 1 vehicle.
Okay, because I thought you had part of this coming from water and part of this
Yes.
coming from sewer.
Water and sewer pay for half of the DPW, which is my vehicle.
Oh, okay,
But they also have in their budget an
their own
upgrade
vehicles.
their own vehicles. Correct.
Okay, thank you.
we can come back to it if you want, Joe, as we move on. If you'd like to circle back, we can certainly discuss it again. If we see what we get through. Good. All right, so now we're on page 8. We did make some cuts here on this page to buildings. I didn't do anything additional. I just didn't know if anybody, Cindy or Mitch, if looking at anything, there was anything there you thought?
Oh,
Did we pull the windows out last time?
I
Mhm.
said last time, didn't we did pull some things, yes.
Okay.
I mean, I know that Jim can go because he feels very strongly about
Oh, I'm
the.
sorry. Jim, go ahead. Jim, I can't hear you.
I'm not sure if Cindy and I are talking about the same thing. What were you going to mention about, Cindy, that I was thinking about?
Well, I was going to say that I know that you feel very strongly about improving the emergency lighting, but what we have does in fact meet code. It is a relatively small number in the bigger picture.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm willing to let that go. Absolutely. It works. We're in a different world than we were when we were talking about that earlier. So not even an issue for me.
Okay.
But I was just wondering about, and I'm not sure if it plays into this at all, about fuel oil. Apparently, it must be very low in cost. Does it make any difference if we bought a year's worth of fuel oil in advance, or do we do that all the time?
We bid that all the time, but our current contract goes, I believe, until I think the end of August or September. So,
No problem. Just a quick thought. Thank you.
I mean, we had it was relatively low compared to what it's been in several years with this last bid.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so if no one else had anything on,
I just had, this is Joe. I did want to focus on item 162480. Is there a chance to postpone the skylight restoration?
I will let Cindy talk about it, but I will point out that we do have a grant for $245,000, and knowing that project was coming, we also have built up some funds for that. Prepaid it. So Cindy?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. If we postpone this, I think there are 2 issues. One, we need to go back to our revenue and decrease our revenue by another $245,000.
It's
Because
an in-out.
yeah, what we don't do, we won't get reimbursed for. The other issue, and this goes with the porch issues as well, is this becomes a deferred maintenance potential. So right now, 5 years ago, we put a temporary cover on the skylight over the ballroom because 5 years ago it was leaking and we had buckets in the ballroom. We now have a much better ballroom. We have a temporary cover on the skylight, which we were told had a 5-year lifespan. So, I feel like if we put it off, we're living on borrowed time and have the potential to have damage to the ballroom that, would have to repair from water damage. We could cross our fingers, but I'm not sure it's the smartest thing to do.
Okay. So moving on, the only thing I had on page 8 was the last line, personal services. That's actually our police department budget. As I'm sure many of you are aware, we have a funded line for a police chief, which is vacant at the current time. I will let you know that the civil service exam for the chief did occur. We do have, we know people who applied. The results that and the list that we can work from, we do not have at this time. With the shutdown, it'll probably be extended. So we do have that position, and which I want to maintain, but we also have an additional officer's position that I would look to fill the chief first before I did the additional officer. So if we remove that, and all it means is we're not funding that line this year. Next year, if we've got great budget figures, it's that line is still there, we could fund it again. We'd be back up to, you know, potentially 3 officers and a chief. So it's just recognizing the limitations we have right now. If we do just not fund that 3rd officer position, it would be a savings of $50,562, and I'd like to do that. Any discussion? All right, then moving on to page 9. Oh, I'm sorry, Jean, were you going to say something? No.
Just to clarify, so that would leave us 2 officers plus a chief
Correct. And all our part-time.
and part-time. Okay,
All
Yep.
the part-time.
great.
Could I ask everybody who's not speaking to mute, because there's some feedback that I keep hearing, like we had last time. I suspect it might be you, Mac, but I don't know for sure. Thank you. Oh, it did go away. Thank you.
All right, moving on to page 9. I, again, was sort of looking at the police budget, 3rd line down, police schools, conferences and dues. You'll notice that in this fiscal year, about 350 was utilized. We'd budgeted 3,300. We had said 5,000. I feel, you know, with our current staffing and all, we could easily take that to 2,000 and have a 3,000 cut in expenditures. Is there a feeling on that or agreement? Okay.
Yeah, I think we can
All
reduce.
right. And also in the police budget, 31,2470 police other expenses, uniforms. Essentially, we've spent $13 this year. For any of you who've sort of checked that out, I think could staff a multi-size police department. It would behoove us to only hire people the same size, I guess. We do have some surplus uniforms, etc., that can always be used, but at any rate, I would like to at least have that from 3,000 to put 1,500 in the budget, which would be removing 1,500 in expenditures. Is there concurrence on that?
I'd take down to 1,000, but 1,500 is good too.
You'd take it even further, Mac?
I mean, yeah, I think so.
All
How
right.
many uniforms do we buy every year? Is it a yearly thing, or is this something that we need to catch up on?
You know, the thing is, it's usually when we have a newer officer, because I say uniforms, and yes, it is some uniforms, but it's also the insignia stuff and sometimes jackets, etc. But, you know, we don't have a very big department right now. I would be fine moving it from 3,000 to 1,000, which would be a 2,000 cut in expenditures. Is everyone good with that? Yep.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mac. So that brings us down to traffic control, the last item, on-street parking. And Cindy did allude to the fact that we could take, oh, but that was only if we did July 1. So that is what it is, right, Cindy? We're at about 1,800 no matter what?
Correct.
18,000, sorry? Correct.
Yep.
No,
Yeah,
nothing there then.
I had a question just above that on the, again, the potential deferral, the $6,000 under 3310-200.
The,
What do we not have that we need?
okay,
Or
I'll
we
let
just
Mitch and Cindy.
replacements?
Well, so for instance, we just changed parking regulations on Walnut Street, so that's gonna require the ordering of new signs. Signs are unfortunately much more expensive than you would think. So every time we want a ultra reflective stop sign, somebody requests, that's where it comes from.
And an ultra
I would
reflective
point
stop
out that
sign.
in the last 5 years, we have spent more than that amount 3 times and less than that amount only twice. So I think that's a reasonable place to be.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, did I do the schools? No, I don't think I must have. Did I skip that or did I do this conferences in schools?
For police, you did it. It's down to 2,000.
Yeah, you know what? It was, I may have been looking further down. All right, so if we're as far as we are, we're at fire department. I know we all received an email from Jim Tallman, and I know we all greatly support our professional volunteered fire department. He was thinking that we'd be making cuts in vehicles in particular. We certainly hadn't done any of that. I told him exactly what we had cut, and a lot of it was building, if you recall. It was the LED lights for the fire hall, etc. Is there any other things? The only reason that was where I was looking at schools. I mean, we budgeted 2,700 in this current budget. 1920, we budgeted 2,500 and exactly 270 have been used. I'm fine leaving it as is, or, you know, maybe it could be reduced a little if they're not utilizing that schooling, but I'm fine leaving it as well.
I just want to express my sentiments that I think we should leave things where it is, the firehouse.
Okay, all right, then nothing else on that page. Moving on to page 10. The only thing I was sort of looking at, and again, it was in light of our discussion at our April 13th meeting on squad funds that they have. If we have just supplied them in this current year with 2 ambulances.
What budget line, Ellen? Sorry.
So I'm looking under ambulance on page 10. I'm not saying a particular line at the moment.
Okay.
But
Thank you.
we didn't really, we made one little thing. It was the tire rims we cut on April 13th, the 2,400 for that. Are there any thoughts?
I wondered, and this is just me wondering, I know that the state is really interested in them going to this computerized system for their tracking. A lot of the costs that we're seeing, the extra costs that we're seeing this year relate to that. And I didn't know whether there is any outside funding, and by outside, I'm not talking about squad funding, but whether there are any resources. And I'm guessing the answer is no, given the fact that the state and everyone else is in the same position we are, but that would help, you know, with the computer purchase, for instance, to make that tracking possible.
Mm-hmm. So the computers, that's the entire 6,000, 1 laptop per vehicle and 1 spare. Mm-hmm. That was one I was looking at, but perhaps not to sort of outside funding, but wondering if with their funds, they could pick that up. Since we did supply the 2 new ambulances and they did receive a significant bequest this year.
I'd just like to express my sentiments that we don't make cuts under ambulance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mac. Wherever you went, there you went. All right, so is that the sentiment? Okay. All right, so nothing on page, no one else had anything on page 10. Moving on to page 11. I didn't really single anything out. Did anybody else?
The only question I have is on the skid steer. Can we finance that out instead of paying it all out at once? I mean, I went online. I realized I don't have any experience on this. I realize there's a favored supplier, but a couple of the manufacturers were offering 0% financing over 5 years.
I think that's a good suggestion, Rich. The only problem with that suggestion is that when you look at our vehicle replacement schedule and you look at all the vehicles, you know, we're sort of scheduled to replace at least one, if not two vehicles every year. So if we only partially pay for this one this year, that affects what we'll be able to do the following year and however many years we decide to finance it for. That said, I realize it's a big expense. The one that we're using now from the sewer department is a 2005. So maybe it's something we come back to when we get to the end to see where we are. And maybe we do consider a financing plan, but I would hate to see it completely go away.
I don't want to see it completely go away. I mean, I'll agree with you, as long as we consider circling back here if we're still short. Because I had discussed, possibly borrowing money, and I realize now we don't have to really borrow money to borrow money. We can defer payments on some of these capital expenses, which has the same effect. But, this is a year that's going to be particularly hard. It's not like we're going to be down 10%. We're going to be down almost 20% this year. So, we're not going to have the same problem in the future. We can bring some more stuff back. But anyway, I'll agree with you for deferring this and thinking about it later.
Okay. All right, so anything else on page 11?
If I may,
Mitch?
the current skid steer that the streets department has would be transferred to the sewer department, which that skid steer is a 2005. The skid steer that the sewer department currently has is like a 1995. So if you wanted to keep that, you would have to up the sewer department's repair line drastically, because that thing is leaking fluid like you wouldn't believe.
No, I'm not saying not get a new one. I'm just commenting on how we finance it.
No, I agree with you. And I know we looked into it, and it looks into another thing about how we purchase things. Is another way we have to do this.
Hey, Mitch, would it be possible for the sewer department to purchase the new one?
I'm sorry. It's possible, but still in a year or two, the streets department's going to need a new skid steer.
Yeah, I understand that.
So yes, technically the sewer plant could purchase their own skid steer.
Cindy, is the reason you're asking that is because otherwise sewer money can only be spent on sewer functions. So at least we'd have the piece of equipment purchased under that isolated
Correct.
fund.
Exactly. I put that down to circle back to, and also, you mentioned the truck. We said we might circle back to the truck, right? So I put those down as to circle back. So are there anything else on page 11?
Yeah, I have under street permanent improvement, 5112 200. I think we could reduce the sidewalk concrete to 15 and the detectable plates to 1,000.
How many detectable plates would we get for 1,000?
I'm gonna have to defer to Mitch on that.
Mitch,
For 1,000, you would probably get 8.
8 for 1,000. Wow.
Sorry, pardon my
That's
ignorance, but
probably
what is a
a high
detectable warming plate or
That's,
Those are the,
warning plate?
I'll let
It
Mitch.
says warning plates, but I think you mean warming plates, don't you?
no, they're
No
warning.
warning.
They're the little squares when you get to the crosswalk that have the bumps on them.
Oh,
Oh, okay. Thanks, Mitch.
Mitch, I know we had a kind of a discussion because there's a couple places where I would really like to see those warning plates and a little more accessibility. I think we kind of put it off and it shouldn't have been. So would 8 allow us to do most of the places we discussed?
Yes, because we have probably half a dozen of them currently in our own possession.
Okay, so Cindy just cut 11,000 from that one. From that, which brings that down. I'll make a note, 11,000 here.
and bring it 19,500.
Yeah. Anything else on that one? All right, going on to page 12. And I was going to kind of defer to Cindy and Mitch. Is there anything in snow removal?
There's really nothing that I can see in snow removal.
Okay. The only reason I was sort of wondering was in prior years, if you look at snow removal material and supplies, and I recognize where we put in a order, but you know, the most we ever spent was 59,340. We budgeted this 1920 budget at 79,000, and as of 4/14 had used 47,000. So, and somehow we've upped it to 82,000 in the 2021 budget. So I was just wondering if there is potentially a slightly more realistic figure there.
I know it's based on the per ton cost of salt and how much we anticipate using. I don't know, Mitch, how much we have stockpiled at this point.
Well, it'll be easier to realize what we have stockpiled once we have our own shed. But the price, I mean, last year it jumped 25% from the prior year. So it's really kind of hard to judge what the price is going to be. I'm doing this off what our current prices we're paying now.
Okay, all right, we will move away from there. The only other one I was looking at was street lighting. And obviously, as of 4/14, we're seeing 2020, we were seeing, you know, almost a $10,000 less in street lighting. We did do the LED conversion. Is there a sense that you know, 35 or 36,000 might be an adequate figure, because the LED conversion didn't occur at the beginning of our 2019-20 year. It was, we were paying a bit with that higher electric cost fixtures.
I'm in for 35, Ellen.
Yeah,
I just,
I hope it's even more than that, but without much history, it's hard to tell.
okay, well then, I think, oh, is there someone else speaking?
Sorry,
No.
that was my fault.
30, all right, so we're lowering that by $10,000. It would be budgeted at 35,000. That's 10,000. I then dropped a little further to Parks Maintenance. 7110-410, Materials and Supply. You know, the miscellaneous, Mitch, is just, obviously we have shrubs and flowers and mulch and paint and things broken out. The miscellaneous in that might be what?
Pretty much anything else. And you know, I would hesitate on cutting too much of this because these are things that you're going to need this time next year.
Because they've already,
You know, because we're gearing up for the summer season. These are things that we're going to need for the following year too.
Okay.
So, I mean, if you want, it all depends on what's going to happen with the parks this year too.
All right. So is there anything else on page 12? $13?
Well, I'll raise the question all the emails came about today. And that is what we can expect of our summer parks season. And I don't think that we can know at this point what our summer parks season looks like. I think it's too early. I think we're still looking for direction from New York State. I do wonder if it would be realistic to anticipate a somewhat reduced season. So if we follow the New York pause, right, and May 15th is our date, as Richard laid out, you know, that really means that it's July before we can start thinking about recreational type activities. Our June has never been an exceedingly expensive month for us because we're always working with the school schedule. This year school's not going to be in session. But, you know, I wonder if we at least recognize at this point when we're looking at that number that our season might be shortened. Or we may find that Ferry Spring, for instance, the beach part of that park is very hard to social distance at. And therefore, it's less likely we fully staff that in terms of lifeguards. I mean, I'm in no way suggesting, as some of the emails suggested, that we reduce this number to 0. But I do wonder if we look at some sort of reduction to reflect a slower start and possibly less usage throughout the summer.
Thank you, Cindy. Richard, I saw your hand.
Thank you. To me, this is one of the elephants in the room, and I know it's going to be very unpopular. I have several problems with Ferry Spring. 1, Ferry Spring is not accessible. 2, it's a very narrow beach. Social distancing is going to be very difficult, and I really don't think people on a beach are going to be wearing masks. I think, and the third thing is, there's a wonderful park on the east side of the lake where people can socially distance, and there's plenty of space and plenty of parking, and it's accessible. Somebody made the suggestion that we charge for people to go. I don't see a purpose of doing that, because if you're going to charge, again, they might as well go to Glimmerglass State Park. If we're allowed to be open, Glimmerglass will be open. I think we have to, I also think the concept of that we supply employment to local students is kind of fallacious, because we're constantly struggling to get lifeguards every year. I think we have to seriously consider, with all things being equal, not opening Ferry Spring.
Well, I don't support that for starters.
I do not support that either.
Jean?
I absolutely don't support that. I think I agree that it's probably going to be a shortened season, and we can't know for sure. But when things start to open up, people are going to want to be outside, and I do think people can social distance, even on a narrow beach. You know, we're gonna have to be creative, but I think we really need to fund it at least, you know, maybe 3/4. Because if the state says, yes, we can open, and then we can't because we didn't budget, I think that'd be really bad.
I have some thoughts.
Right?
So yeah, I definitely understand that we're probably looking at a shortened season here. It doesn't bring any joy, of course. You know, comfortable with July 1st if we are setting a date this evening or if it's up for discussion. But you know, I just want to communicate, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir, that, you know, this crisis we're all dealing with is a huge toll financially, etc. But it's also a huge mental health toll on our people. And I am certainly not the only person that takes great joy in going and sitting in the woods to get away from the hecticness, etc. And I think our village parks are going to be an important part of coming back to whatever our normal will be. And, you know, I think it's important for the mental health, the general health of the community, to have that outlet once it's safe. You know, if we budget and then the state says, sorry, you can't do it, then we save that money anyways, because we can't open. But I think that, you know, I totally second Gene that if we cut the budget, even, you know, to the point where we can't open one of our parks, it will be very problematic. So that is what I have to say.
I think, Richard, I'll get to you in a sec. I just one point, because I spent a lot of years as parks chair, so I understand, Gene. Two things. One, there actually were times we couldn't open Ferry Spring because we couldn't get lifeguards. So, you know, it doesn't always mean we didn't have the money to do it. Sometimes it doesn't work. And what we really, really, really have to remember in this scenario, it's not us. Even if we put that money in there, if the state says you're not opening those swimming areas and they don't give us the approval to do so, those aren't opening. I don't care how much hue and cry there is. You know, it's not our decision. It's on the state level there. I did have one question, Terry, and when people keep zeroing in on 52,000, but correct me if I'm wrong, that is actually part of our park superintendent as well, not our caretakers, or not? I can't hear you, I'm sorry. Oh.
And I don't believe so. For summer recreation, Mitch can weigh into that, but I think that
That is
Bob's
solely our caretakers and our lifeguards.
caretakers and the lifeguards, yes.
Okay, all right. Rich.
Okay, 3 points again. One, there are fixed costs with opening. We have to find a caretaker. Whether or not we then open the beach or not, once we commit to the caretaker, we have the caretaker. So that can't be canceled. Two, you talk about the importance of the parks, but we've already canceled the band concerts, which have a high utilization. So it's not as if we're not sacrificing some things in the parks. Three, are you guys willing to then turn around and close it if we can't maintain the social distancing and the use of masks? Which I think is important, because I just don't see, you know, given the parameters, I just don't see how you're going to actually enforce that on such a narrow strip of beach.
So we might have to be creative and limit the number of people that are there at one time. We might have to take reservations. You know, I think we're going to have to be creative, but
that makes it very expensive per person to use that park.
You know, I don't mind saying that I'm really not interested in all the reasons why it can't be done. My position is we try it, We adjust as we go. If we're shut down, we're shut down. If we can't do it, we can't do it. We start and see how far we can get. That's how I see it.
Totally agree, Jim.
Any more discussion on that? All right, so it looks like we're not making any cuts or adjustments to parks. The only one I was wondering about, Mitch, and we may have already done this one a bit, but I noticed our propane usage as of 4/14, we'd budgeted 2,800. Right, no, wait, I read that wrong. We budgeted 2,000 and we used 385. And we did budget down to 1,000 because we recognized that 3 Mile will have electrical service this summer. So I just was wondering if there's any movement at all on that one, because the most we tend to use between 500 and 789.
A question
was
about
my-
what you just said, Ellen. Have we gotten the approval and the contract signed on getting the electrical service for 3 Mile?
It is, we're paying for the service. It's not like we wouldn't,
I thought we had to work out a deal with, all
there is an agreement.
right.
So,
Okay, so I don't know what you're looking to save here. I mean, you've
all right,
got,
so I don't know. I'm even looking for a couple hundred, I guess.
okay, if you could cut it $500, I would be comfortable with that.
Oh, okay. That's more than I wanted. Thank you. So that's a 500.
So I don't feel like we have to leave the 52,000 untouched completely. I mean, I think that we could bump it down a little bit. If
Could go for 45.
if our season's shortened, I think it's reasonable to assume we would pay caretakers a little less. We'd have fewer hours of lifeguards. I think it's reasonable to bump it down a little bit.
I agree with Gene.
All right, so
If I,
and Mac are on the Parks Board, so that's sort of their feeling. You're thinking maybe 47. Joe?
well, yeah, I just don't know how you do that if we are going to have a cohort of lifeguards and caretakers. We'll call you if we need you. Is that what it's going to be? What can they depend on from the village in terms of their employment?
When would they usually start normally if things were normal?
It would normally start Memorial Day weekend, but I will tell you that
It's not
the
going to.
permits from the bathing beach come from New York State Department of Health. I spoke to them today, and all public bathing beaches and swimming pools currently cannot open. So I can't answer that question, and neither could they.
So realistically, July 1st,
I mean, normally I have my permit application from Department of Health by the beginning of April. There is not even anybody working in the office right now because they've been reassigned to work on the pandemic, and you have to call and leave a message and they get back to you. And they got back to me, and I mean, that's basically what was said. So, I mean, we can't open those beaches without a permit.
Right, and I fully respect that. I'm just, how do we recruit and hold these lifeguards?
I don't know how you do that until you know you're going to open and when you're going to open.
Right, so it's understood we are not paying them under any circumstances. We're only paying them if they work. And they
Correct.
understand that.
Well,
Okay.
I mean, nobody has approached me to apply for a position yet. You know, I'm sure based on what's going on, but you know, normally we put out either advertisements this time of the year, but we've been holding back until we hear what's going on and when things might open up again.
So I have a question. Would it would it make sense then to leave it? Well, because we have to pass a budget. It would be great if we could make this decision next month.
Can't,
But we cannot do that.
cannot.
I mean, Gene, I mean, even starting on July 1st, that's a portion of time they'd usually be being paid. And I understand that we're adding other things in here. How are we going to hold them, recruit them, et cetera? But if they're starting July 1st, will still be a reduction in how much they're paid. They're not going to be paid for the month of June before not, being even hired. So is a small reduction of 7,000, like bring it to 45,000, because that leaves, you cut some off, but you leave enough in there to do what we need to do when we get the go ahead. I want to be optimistic about that. So
That's my
Richard?
feeling. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Richard had his hand.
And I'll make another argument here. Maybe we should concentrate on getting at least one opened instead of trying to open two. I mean, sounds like it's going to be tough enough to get one open if we can't sign up people ahead of time.
I know, Rich, but we would still need to budget for both. In the end, if we only open one, well, then there's a savings. I don't think that's anybody's goal. My preference is certainly to have both open. But if we can't open, then that money's not just going to disappear. So we'll have the budget savings there if that happens. But I think the big push here is to be prepared to open and to have the budget necessary to do that. Of course, understanding that we're being squeezed and that we still need to shave some off here.
Cindy?
I was just going to add, as the parent of 2 teenagers, the job prospects in Cooperstown this summer are not especially high, right? So if you want a lifeguard, you could work for the village. Well, we're having this debate. You could work for Glimmerglass State Park. They're going to be under the same rules we are. The country club's going to be under the same rules. The gym is closed. There's no jobs at Dreams Park. So I think when we're ready to hire people, there will be people available.
I agree.
And that's the other thing we have to remember too, is that with the gym closed, some of these certifications have not occurred. And actually to work for the state park, you need we don't tend to grab them because they get paid at a higher rate, but they have a much higher certification level. Yes, Jean, I'm sorry.
I feel strongly that we can't just open one park for a couple reasons. They cater to totally different groups.
Clientele.
There's 3 Mile tends to have young kids. Berry Spring tends to have older people. If we only have one park, it's going to be harder to social distance because they'll be more crowded. So.
Okay.
I'm just gonna back off at this point. I'm clearly being outvoted here, so I'd give up.
All right.
I
We're
will-
leaving that
I will
as
say
it
one-
is. I'm sorry.
I will say one thing, as it comes to building docks, it'll be very hard to do and social distance because it's one person with another person right next to each other. So that's another thing to bring into consideration. And plus, we're down to 50% staff right now, and I don't see how it's going to happen.
Thank you, Mitch. All right. Moving on, if there's nothing else on that page.
Was there any change to the budget, or is it just being left
To
to the
page-
personal service?
No, at this point, there was
Okay.
not. The only change that we did on page 13 was the propane to 500.
So you don't think we could bump off 7,000 from the 52,000? Go down to 45?
It's a real unknown, isn't it? I think that without a doubt, as Mitch said, those docks aren't going to be in by Memorial Day. There's just and we aren't going to get our licenses to operate sort of thing, or approval. So certainly you could lower it. I'm not exactly sure, if we're just grabbing a number here, but it could be reduced. So Jean, if you would like to make a recommendation to lower that, let me know.
I think I recommend putting it at 45,000,
Okay, there
So-
it goes.
taking 7 off.
7,000 off. Thank you.
Thank you, Gene.
All right, anything else then before moving on? All right, moving on to page 14. The thing that jumped at me here was under Doubleday Field, about just below halfway down on the page 14, 7140-480 Doubleday Field repairs, 297 games at $50 is basically the way it's calculated. We already know we've had, I'm sorry, Richard. I was going to say we know we've had some cancellations. It's a little unsure how many games we'll have, but I think that figure could probably be adjusted. Richard? Yes, Richard?
So I also think we can cut 7140-410 because a lot of that is dependent on the number of games played. The resurfacing, the reseeding, the repainting, the liming, the maintenance of the field after use, the number of bases. I think that could be cut 30%.
Mitch, would you like to weigh in on Doubleday Field 7140, 410 Doubleday Field materials and supplies? We had budgeted at 18,500. Would you like to weigh in?
Well, looking at what we have spent as of April 14th, it's less than half. I'd be comfortable cutting it some because you're going to be in the same situation. You're going to need this stuff a year from now. But I would be comfortable cutting it some.
Okay, so it's at 18,500. Are you thinking cutting it down to 11,000?
No, I said cut it by 30%. That would be basically almost exactly cutting 5,000 off of it.
I'd be comfortable with that.
So taking it to
13,500.
13,500 in the budget. Is that what I'm sorry. Yeah, you said take 5,000 off, right?
Yeah.
So it would be 13,500 in the budget.
Yes.
Mhm. All right, so going down further to Doubleday Field repairs, which is essentially, again, number of games times 50. I don't know if we have a clear sense, but we know we've had cancellations already. Terry?
I mean, I don't have a clear sense as far as total number of games yet. It's hard. I mean, all of April and probably the most part of May. But I mean, I think if you look at what you've spent, it generally doesn't come into that. I mean, we had one year where it was higher, but
I think it's unlikely that we get more than 100 games this season. If we're going by number of games here, which I'm assuming we are.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one.
Do you have a sense of our reservations currently? I know we've had cancellations, a couple in July, and
yeah, I mean, we had, I think, 2 or 3 games in September too. I really don't at this point. I mean, June is always a slower month. The tournaments pick up in July, August and September. So if you cut it down to 100 games, that's 5,000. I mean, if tournaments
Do you think that's
can
too much?
play and
Like taking too much out? Are we underestimating?
No, I think you're right on that one, Mac.
I just think because these folks are coming from all over the country to play on, or internationally probably to play on the field. So it's just like a different situation when we're talking about park usage versus Doubleday Field. I feel like we should expect significantly less.
All right, so I've heard taking 5,000 off that we
No,
had
taking
budgeted,
it down to 5,000.
taking it all the way to 5. Oh,
well, I mean, 100 games times 50, that's what it comes to, but
right. So we think we're gonna have 100 rentals this summer.
I don't know.
No one knows. It's
I
a
mean,
crapshoot.
if we get the tournaments at the end of the season, it could make up for it. And then maybe some other, I mean, there are some people that were to play in April and May that would look towards the fall if, things got lifted, but
Mhm.
I don't know. My crystal ball's not working.
Yeah. All right. The sense is that we could take that down from 14,850 to 5,000. Correct? So that's a 9,850 in expenditures out.
I mean, so far this year, it's been 2,241. What do you think, Mitch?
I think it seems drastic, but we don't know what the cuts are going to continue to go. How many people are going to cancel?
Yeah.
So, it's kind of hard to decide.
All right. Well, we can always have a budget modification. And I should point out that, on all these regional governor phone calls every day, one thing that's become very clear is that the governor has instituted the ability to look at the budget, the adopted budget, like 4 times. It's called almost a rolling sort of thing. So and the first time is occurring in May, or at the end of this month, April 30th, beginning of May. And if he sees that the revenues have really dropped, he can institute across the board cuts, and he has that executive authority to do it. And he will do it again in a few months' time, et cetera, as it goes forward. So, we put these in the budget, but it may mean that, okay, suddenly things lift, I don't know, and we can always have budget modification. But what we're trying to do is we've essentially, just so you know where we're at, we have cut our revenues by $538,400 between April 13th meeting and this meeting. That's the tally I came up with. Unfortunately, our cut to our appropriations or expenditures is
I thought that was
100,000 short of that yet. So we're looking at still a discrepancy there. I think that's why we were encouraged to sharpen our pencils when we look at this budget.
Ellen, or well, actually, perhaps this question is for Cindy. With that 100,000 still that we need to account for not having, can that be filled by your lingo is so much more sophisticated than mine, but we had discussed it. What am I trying to?
He's trying to say, do we need to, when we look at the TEP ban, do we consider that a place to make up the extra 100,000? or maybe not all of the 100,000, because I actually don't think we have 100,000 coming out of this budget, but some percentage of what we're still missing, understanding that that means that we extend our debt into the next fiscal year.
What I'm wondering is, do we need to flip through this again and go deeper, which I of course, and I'm sure you all share this too, don't want to do that. If there's a reserve funds available, or if we can extend debt, as Cindy said, if those are some alternatives to making more line by line cuts here.
And I'll go back to the previous argument. I'm sorry, Joe. I was going to go back to the previous argument. Now, given that, it makes some sense to do some capital expenditures over a longer period of time than we plan and hope that we can make it up in the future. It's better than not making them at all.
Can
I'm
I
sorry, Joe.
just, are you saying, Ellen, that at the moment we need to find $100,000 more in cuts?
Well, we aren't all the way through yet. We're still
Right,
at the
no, that's
top
what I'm
of page
saying.
15. But
Right.
what I'm saying to you is, based on what we decreased our revenues by on April 13th and this evening, came to $538,400. What we are at, and I've been keeping a running tally here, we are at 440,749. So slightly less than 100,000 gap yet in our expenditures, appropriations to our
Okay.
revenues.
And we still have some pages to plow through here, so we may still yet find that.
Correct, some of it. That's what I'm saying. Yep.
Okay.
So let's
Okay.
move
So
So we're
forward.
actually in a better spot than we just thought, or at least I just thought 5 seconds ago. Is that
You are? Oh, did you think we were all the way through the budget? Or
no, of course not.
Ellen, what was the number that you had for cuts? Because I'm at about 450. Is that close to what you're at?
oh, I had 440,749.
We're in the same vicinity.
Oh, okay.
All right, so for this repairs, are we taking it down to 5?
I did.
Okay,
There was nothing else on that page, correct? No, all right. So now we've moved to page 15.
I have a suggestion.
Mhm.
Under shade trees, 85, 64, 40, is this something we can defer some or a lot of? There's a $17,000,
I had the same question.
$1,500 stump removal. I guess if the stump is there, I don't, anyway, that's just a thought.
I know
It's not
probably
just for one
Cindy
stump
and-
removal, it's more than one.
Sure. But
It seems that we could put off removing the stumps. I'm seconding what you're saying, Joe. I think that it's a decent spot.
well, it's a big amount of money. I guess our current amount is $37,000. So how much of that can we defer?
well, we haven't done it out of this year's budget yet. And the reason, and we were gonna go ahead and then the tree trimming and removal, unless it's in danger of like crashing onto a house or something, has been declared non-essential. So, I mean, we might be able to, if we could get a proposal, we could encumber, by purchase order and go ahead once from this year's budget, once they've given the go-ahead.
I mean, the flip side of that is if we don't end up doing it in the month of May, then we're putting what we would have spent this year into surplus, and we absolutely have to do it next year because we get a snow like we had last night. And if we're not up to date on our trees, then, you know, there's a lot of potential for problems.
Yeah, and I mean, if we had the proposal, we could cut a purchase order and that would encumber it.
Can't we just take the surplus from this year and roll it over?
It's, you have to have a purchase order to encumber it to do that.
And so we had a bid on it, didn't we, or a quote? No,
We
get it.
didn't get a bid, if you remember, it came in and then we decided to, you know, go ahead and try to get some proposals, but that's when the order came down that, you know, just for tree trimming and removal, just to, you know, not remove something that's dangerous, but that it does need to be removed is considered non-essential.
Mhm. Correct me if I'm wrong, this is the 16,000 and the 17, that, so which is basically $33,000. That's what we usually have, we contract with someone, correct?
Yes, which we haven't done for this year. So what I'm saying is you could probably encumber this year's and eliminate next year's.
Maybe we should do that at this point.
So we can't completely eliminate it because we need to spend $2 per capita in order to remain a tree city.
You know, we sort of had this discussion before, and I'm slightly unclear why our village crew, like, I realized they went around and did a lot of the street shop branches and all, you know, I've seen it on all the streets. Why there can't be a recognition of kind of in kind in that?
It has to show in our budget. So we could find some way to reflect that. I mean, I think as long as we spend our emergency work funds, we would be all right, because that's more than $2 per capita, but our budget needs to show $2 per capita if it's important to us to remain a tree city.
And can we double dip on any of that? In other words, we're getting quite a few trees in our TEP project. We're getting quite a few trees in our Doubleday. What about the bills, shall I say, for the landscaping, et cetera? If that were broken out much the same way in Doubleday, that when we were doing the parking lot, water and sewer helped, you know, because we ran new water and sewer lines. So they had costs associated with that. Why can't we take some, because we're doing a lot with our trees, is all I will say, between our TEP and our Doubleday. Why can't they bear in this instead of this additional amount? Because if you took those plus this, we're spending over 100,000 a year on trees, you know?
Sure. I mean, they'll be in the wrong budget year for our budget year because we run June to May. I think we can make that argument. I don't think that there's a reason we can't make that argument. It's just much harder to document because generally what we do is we send them this page of the budget.
So it's an accounting or a filing thing.
Yeah.
So we won't have hit it this year, Cindy, if we don't encumber that. We won't have hit it this year.
No, it's
So,
true enough. Yeah.
But so maybe for this year, you might want to take the TEP tree planting funds or whatever, because that's going to occur that is supposedly going to occur in May.
That's what we think. Yeah. The Doubleday ones have already been planted. So.
Right. But they probably are in this payment that just the Keller that we may be approved tonight, and that payout, it might have been in that one too.
Right.
So. Well, that doesn't help us decide. Do we cut it for next year? What do we got in the works? Anything?
I'm just not convinced that if our budget year ends May 31st, we're going to be able to encumber tree money before May 31st.
Okay. So I'm not hearing any strong feeling on that. Is that correct?
Well, it's partly maybe in my case, because I'm not quite sure I'm understanding. You were asking, Ellen, if some of the tree expenditures we have made with our projects, Doubleday and TEP, would qualify us or fulfill our obligation about the per capita expenditure. And Cindy, is that correct or incorrect? That we can't maintain our status by referring to those expenditures?
I think we probably can. I think the bigger issue is that sometime we need to trim our trees. And we will either encumber money for that in May, or we will encumber money for that after May. And given the New York pause, we don't know which that will be.
But I'm saying if we do the accounting for our status with those projects, we don't need to encumber this money for shade trees right here.
We need to trim our trees. I mean,
That's a different issue.
that's
So-
the issue that I'm referring to. Our trees need to be trimmed for safety.
And they need to be trimmed to the tune of the 16 plus 17,000, the 30, $33,000. You're saying we need to spend all of that money. There's no money we could avoid spending.
Mitch, do you have a sense from our contractor what the cost is?
I'm getting the sense that this is a budget issue as opposed to a monetary issue.
If
We're
you
going to
want-
take money that we don't spend this year and it's going to become surplus, right?
if
The
I
problem-
get-
So
Right.
we have a little bit more money going next year than we planned on. So I think we don't have to, in our minds, we can accept the fact that we are, however much we didn't spend this year, that much less in debt next year. So it's a different way of looking at it.
To
I have
agree
a
with
dollar
you,
figure
it
going
is.
right now, and I plan to have a PO in the next couple days, and it's less than what we have budgeted. I would be comfortable if we trimmed the contract, professional and technical services, maybe 5,000.
To reduce it by that much?
5,000, I would be comfortable.
So you're saying you have a contract, you can encumber those funds for this year. For next year, we would still allot 33,000.
For our current year, I can have those funds encumbered, but for the following year, it would have to be reduce that 37,000 down to 32,000.
32. Okay, all right, 5,000. All right, anything else on this page? This is getting painful here. We're looking for nickels and dimes. Anything else on 15? 16?
Sorry. So three things on 16. The easiest one near the bottom is building reserve 10,000. I would eliminate that.
Can you remind me what that was you were thinking of there?
I think we just always try to put some money away for 22 Main Street. I don't think that in this case it was designated for a particular project.
Okay.
Then the other two that are more complicated discussions are the principal and interest on the TEP and the principal and interest on Doubleday, which are under serial bonds near the bottom.
Cindy,
Mhm.
is there any word on trolleys this year?
Yeah, I
Or-
think we need to have that discussion when we get through this part of the budget, because I do think we need to start making decisions about the trolley.
It's
Okay.
up in it's the next item in our new business. You guys aren't getting off that easy tonight. But remember that the trolley fund is an enterprise fund. It's really not impacting us in this a budget, the general fund. Okay, so looking at TEP, are you thinking instead of, I know you were going to envision paying off the balance of the TEP note this
Yep.
year at 290.
Yep.
So rolling it over one.
Yeah, I mean, 115 of that 290 is currently in the capital account. In our revenues, it's being shown, being transferred from the capital account to the general fund to make this 290 payment. So if we go below 115, where it currently says 290, we need to make adjustments to our revenues.
Mhm.
I'm not excited about doing it, but you know, that's where we are.
The only reason that I think that this is the way we should be heading is as we had these philosophical discussions as we began our whole budget process back at the beginning of the year. And historically, once we had instituted paid parking on street and we're generating 400,000 plus, we were always like, oh, it's all going to streets. That's the way we can kind of sell it. Well, we're not going to get it anymore. And the bottom line is that half, not quite half, but a good portion of that paid parking revenue is coming from Doubleday, which we haven't really been looking at, which was put in place in 2007. So we're doing a big $5.8 million Doubleday project. So instead of always thinking of those parking revenues going to streets, we need to start thinking of TEP. So we were just kind of finally, let's clear off the streets and then really begin to focus on where some of those other revenues were needed and being utilized, being generated too by Doubleday. So I would concur that that's one way to do it, Cindy. So that would put us where we kind of want to be, is all I will say.
I mean, I did want to ask Deb because I think that the interest that's showing on Doubleday may actually be higher than the interest based on an email exchange that we had. And the reason that I bring that up is that our Doubleday ban is at a lower rate than our TEP ban.
The 101,500 for Doubleday is the correct amount. I verified that with Munistat.
So when we were
It's not
talking,
solely interest, remember, Cindy. There's also fees associated with that.
so Deb, when we were talking by email, you had said that there was like a $30,000 credit or the like.
Right, we've received that. It is in the account. So we owe the 101.5.
But we currently have 30.
That is in the capital project account that was given to us when we received the whole amount.
So I guess the question is, knowing that that's a lower interest rate, should it be 101.5 or should it be 75?
No, it's 101.5. I verified that with Katie at Munistat.
So where does the 30 come in? That's what's confusing me.
30 is in our bank account. That was when we received the full 5.8 million. It was in the 30, was in there.
Do you understand why, Cindy? Is it because we collected 20 back from Delaware? We had funds in there. That's why it really did not relate to that in the capital fund. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, so I get that. And my question is then, should that 30 that's in the capital account be shown as revenue and be applied toward this 101.5 payment?
it really can't, and I'll tell you why. Because the AUD, and correct me if I'm wrong, or the comptroller, whatever, had us, you know how we did $100,000 planning grant to secure funds for Doubleday?
Yep.
We haven't received the ESD 47.5. The only thing that got in there was the 20,000 back from Delaware. We in other words, that 100,000 is shown in that capital account. So that 20 that came in really, in some ways, was paying that off. So we
Okay.
only owed 80. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Yeah, that five, in other words, think of it as not 5.8 project. Think of it as a 5.9 because for some, I've had this discussion and to my mind, that was prior and in a general fund, but it is in there and is shown to be owed as well.
So my only question is, between these two lines, is it worth taking the money out of Doubleday, which has a lower interest rate, which we may have to do because that's an interest payment, or out of TEP, which is a higher interest rate, which is principal? Does that question make sense?
What is our interest rate on TEP?
I think it's 275.
Mhm.
And that's okay.
Deb can confirm that, but that's what my mind
And it's
remembers.
1.75 on Doubleday. You know, my only problem here, Cindy, is that the TEP is going to be done in 3 weeks and we're going to be paying for it for a while. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I would rather look at not at taking maybe 3 years on that if need be. And it's quite possible when we come to renew it, and because it will need to be renewed, that TEP next February. It might not be at 2.75, it might be at
Right.
1.9, who knows? So
Right.
I still think that's the better way to go on this.
Did you find it, Deb, what the interest rate was?
It's 2.75 on the TEP.
Until next February.
Until next February, yes.
So do you want to only pay and not pay back? You want to pay 190? Is that what you're contemplating, or?
Well, I think we need to know what the number is that we're still looking for, and then we can take it out of there. We can't go below 115, but I don't think we need to go below 115.
No. All right, well, that could be it right there. That sort of brings most of our, you know, if it's even 100 or that we drop it. In other words, put 190 in as the principal payment. You know, we would have it. So I would say, so does that figure have to be worked up a little more, Deb? Is that what? Instead of 290, if we said 190, do you need to do additional calculations then?
Yeah, I probably would have to go through and work that out.
Okay, but I think that could be essentially the budget. The thing is, I remember the one that was our tentative budget, remember, by New York State law was March 20th. We've made changes on it on April 13th, but that hasn't really been adopted. It's all part of this working document. My feeling is we need to adopt this second tentative revision with everything we did tonight in order for it to be in place by May 1st. So.
Yeah, and include the the revisions from April 13th as well.
Yeah, April 13th and tonight, those revisions in this budget, this becomes our new tentative. We have to formally adopt this, right, Terry? All these changes? Okay.
Yes.
So what I'm looking for now is a motion.
May I just ask a preliminary question, Ellen?
Sure.
Joe here. the water account, you're suggesting we don't have to address savings that we might find there, which in turn could help fund out of surplus, help fund our fund deficit. We will stop the discussion of the budget with the fund and not proceed through the water, for example.
I would say so. And the reason is, remember, water and sewer are separate. Sewer can only be for sewer things. Water could be utilized for other things. What is not spent in this year goes into water surplus. So we know they have healthy surplus. We know also that, you know, we're doing a $9 million wastewater treatment plant. We know that some of that sewer money is going to be allocated. We also know we're doing a $5.8 million Doubleday project with a third base building that foreseeably will have, you know, 38 bathrooms. We're going to need water and sewer funds to help pay the costs on that project as well. So those are places those funds will be utilized. So it really isn't impacting our fund, our general fund.
Okay, thanks.
Ellen,
Mac,
sorry, I just wanted to clarify, when you were asking for a motion just now, is that to adopt this as our tentative budget, or did I misunderstand that?
you understood me, Mac. So it's to adopt this as the tentative budget with
No.
all the changes that we made on April 13th, as well as tonight on April 27th. Both the reductions in revenues that have been done and the reductions in our appropriations.
Okay.
Excuse me a minute. It's actually going to be the adopted budget. The
That's what I
tentative
thought, yeah.
will no longer
Yes.
be in there.
Right, but you're saying adopted.
Yes.
So, and pardon my ignorance about the process, on this vote on the tentative budget, which will become the proposed budget.
Adopted budget.
Adopted
Thank
budget.
you, Terry. Sorry, my apologies. And once it becomes the adopted budget, is there another vote? Or is this the, okay.
This is
thank
it.
you. That's what I was wondering. I
Yeah.
appreciate the clarification.
But-
And the second thing, before we take a vote, Ellen, you were keeping a running tally. Could you just one last time go over the revenue the revenue we covered was 538,400. The expenditures, after we just went through, do you have a final tally for the expenditure cuts?
If it is, did I get your 10 building reserves came out? If it's with the 100,000 being removed from that TEP line we were just looking at in that repayment, then we would be at about 555,749. So we are a teeny bit more, like 17,000 more than we cut from revenue, which is fine, because as you know, we were pulling anyway from surplus for this budget, as you saw on like page 2 of your budget.
Okay. And that number was 550.
That, you know, as I say, I've got a little pencil calculation going here, and that's what it came up with, the 100,000 being removed from that TEP repayment line. I had 555,749. So they are slightly over just by, you know, $17,000.
Sure. Well, that's a good thing.
Okay, so has a motion been made, Joe?
I just had to compare apples to apples on tonight's budget that we were looking at. We started out the evening with $6,113,823 as appropriations, and that was going to be also our balanced budget with revenues. So we are reducing that by the 580, practically the 584.
No, lower than that.
538.
Well, you're
Thank you.
counting all the funds. You need to look at the general fund.
Just the
Just, right,
general.
just the A fund, I'm sorry.
The G, yeah, the A fund there. The 4 million. figure.
876.
Yeah,
Okay. So
Okay, thank you.
I guess my question is, what is our final revenue projection? And what is our final budget for the A fund?
well, once this, I've just told you what we reduced from our revenues. So Deb will run all the other ones. If you had kept a tally as we went through, you know, you would be able to sort of see what it was. But essentially, overall, tonight, on April 13th, we reduced our revenues by 101,900. And then
Sorry,
added-
Alan, I can't help you. You got to speak directly into the microphone.
On April 13th, we reduced our revenues by 101,900. I worked from that number as we took things off, including 358 from paid parking, 5,500 from beach fees, 6,000 for parking permits, 2,000 from vending permits, and 65,000 from our parking tickets. That, if you added it all up, came to 538,400. We reduced our revenues by. Same way, on April 13th, we took 317,827 out of our appropriations or expenses. Then we had a whole list, which we all were working on tonight, that came down, and with the addition of the TEP 100,000, it took us to 555,749. So essentially, that was what was cut. So there's only like a $17,000 variance.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're still waiting for a motion to, with the changes that were made on April 13th and tonight on April 27th, to adopt this budget. for
So
now.
moved. So
Thank you,
moved.
Second.
Joe. And seconded by Richard. Didn't I see your hand, Richard? I guess so. All in favor?
I
Thank you so much. This was
Congratulations.
probably one of the most difficult budgets, and I thank you all. This has been very hard work, and I recognize that because there's just so many unknowns. So we may have to go back and make a few budget modifications as the year progresses. But I think we have successfully done what we needed to do, and I really thank you all for your fiscal responsibilities here. Before we're done, and we're not done, as you heard Cindy say, she wanted to have a little bit of a trolley discussion. Cindy?
Yeah, we also need to do the credit card fee
Yeah, and I have something else on Doubleday, but I would just let you go for
and the
trolley.
gator. All right, so the trolley. We started talking about the trolley last time we were together. The easy part of this, I think, you may recall that we partner with the Chamber of Commerce regarding the trolley on the printing of a brochure, which is the area map. The first thing that I would like to suggest is that rather than print the operating schedule of the trolley on the brochure, that we on the brochure direct people to a website to find out the current trolley operating schedule, because I have a feeling it's going to vary from what we initially planned. So that seems like the easy part of it, to not print anything at this point, but direct people to a website. Does that make sense?
Sure.
All right, then I think we need to start making some decisions about the trolley. Trolley usage is really tied to the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum. We do not at this point know when the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum is going to reopen. But if it's not open, then we shouldn't be running the trolley, in my opinion. There's not a reason for it. And honestly, if people can find parking in the downtown area, I'm not sure how much they're going to be using the trolley lots at all. And, parking their cars remotely and taking public transportation probably is not on people's to-do lists this summer. So what I would like to suggest is we make a decision tonight to start the trolley season no earlier than July 1st. So that we can plan on that. And then realizing this may require a special meeting in June, that at least 2 weeks prior, we consider that date to be rolling and we keep reevaluating when and if we start trolley service this summer. Knowing that our provider, Leatherstocking Trolley, needs at least 2 weeks to be able to get drivers on board. So for instance, if we really want to start July 1st, by mid-June, we need to make that decision. If we really want to start by mid-July, then by the end of June, we need to make that decision. So we need to make a decision 2 weeks before we start, but I'd like to suggest, just for planning purposes, that we say that it will be no earlier than July 1st.
Any discussion of that?
So moved.
Well, I just have a brief question. I don't know if there's any value to it. Cindy, I know that something that happened in the past, and the past isn't exactly a very good model for what we're dealing with right now. But is there any value to running trolleys on the weekends? Because, you know, if we do have people coming, we don't really know. Weekends are more popular, especially for regional visits, that kind of thing. Is there any value in that, or just put it all off, hold off, and make a decision later?
Well, I mean, I think if the Hall of Fame is open, then yes, maybe it makes sense on the weekends. If the Hall of Fame's not open, I think the parking that we have available can probably support visitation to our downtown, knowing that we have the Doubleday Field parking lot, on-street parking lots. And actually you can, you know, if you're ambitious, you can walk from the red lot to the downtown area. Part of the reason that I want to see the brochure say go to the website is we don't know when the Hall of Fame does open, if it might have reduced hours, if it might have weekend only hours, what that looks like. You know, it's probably not going to be 9 to 9, 7 days a week, thinking about cleaning schedules. So yes, I think at some point it may make sense to run the trolley in the weekend. In my mind, that's not the month of June.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Richard?
Again, under New York pause, the earliest that New York pause is removed is May 15th. Under the plan that the governor has put forward, activities, museums, other large group activities can't possibly open until July 1st under his current schedule, at the very earliest. I mean, again, if he removes pause on May 15th, you don't have museums and other events and other attractions opening before July 1st. So I think this is a very safe thing to do.
Essentially, Cindy, didn't you make the motion and Richard, you second it?
Yes.
For July 1st? Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to begin trolley operation July 1st. Is there
No earlier than July 1st.
no earlier than July 1st? And we obviously have a chance in June to kind of, or May, to reconsider as well. We'll have a clearer sense, you know, we're 2 months out. So all those in favor? Aye. Okay, opposed? No, no one was opposed. All right. Let's see, and Cindy, why don't you go ahead now with the credit card, the 25-cent credit card fee?
Yeah, we built our budget around the fact that we plan to charge a credit card fee this summer. So I'd like to make a motion that we amend local law number 1 of 2016, which was a resolution regarding parking fees, to include our ability to charge a credit card fee to users using credit cards of 25 cents for a transaction.
Seconded by Richard. Any discussion? All in favor? Great. And then the last thing, you all received that in an email today. It was a proposal for value engineering at Doubleday. As most of you know, we've are going to be finishing phase 1 and phase 2 of the Doubleday project, the parking lot and the historic grandstand renovations by about the 3rd week in May. That's all very exciting. We had some setbacks on the third baseline because of the need, the $622,000 we ended up having to expend to make sure that the soil was stable for bleachers and a building. That if you've been over that way, you see that the hole went down, now it's being filled back up. So that's all in place. We recognize that that was a major cut into our revenue, our funds, our $5 million in grant funds and other funds that we would be utilizing for this project. And we need to make some cuts probably in the building. We want to contain as much as possible the design of that building because we were really happy with the design of the building. It was, SHPO liked it, everybody liked it because it was compatible with the 1939 grandstand. It carried over some of the same ironwork look, the same glazed block, etc. It was, and it would also have served a very necessary function of providing bathrooms, etc., and ADA compliant bathrooms and seating in a grandstand, which we don't have otherwise. So we need to make some value engineering though on that building. We need to see if we can make some cuts to that building without losing what we see as the visual and architectural integrity of it, that we may have to reduce the scale a little bit. We certainly know we will probably change the bleacher design. It was very complex with, you know, walkways going back into the building. It may now just be ramps coming up on the sides with that terrace level coming off. There are various things that are considered in value engineering. Also where trusses are involved under the side areas. Instead of using ironwork, which is very expensive, we might use wood. We might change some of the materials. We don't know. These are some of the concepts we put out, but in order to advance those ideas and come up with revised plans, we've been given a proposal of, and you received this today, $21,500 for Saratoga Associates, who did the architectural work, and Delaware Engineering, who did the engineering based on those architectural drawings, to determine exactly how much value engineering would save us. Would it be 100,000? It's probably not worth it. Would it be 400,000? So it is a proposal, and these funds would come out of the Doubleday capital project, but it is an expense in there that we have not approved. It would be this additional funds to look at the potential for value engineering the third base building. Are there any questions? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Cindy made it. Seconded by
Second.
Jim, I'm sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that, as far as I know, is all the business, unless there was something else, Terry.
Yeah, just one more thing, I'm sorry. Could we get a motion to authorize Deb to prepare the tax warrant, because that has to be published twice so that we can collect the taxes regarding the budget. So since we couldn't have it prepared ahead of time, but.
Richard made the motion, seconded by Mac. All in favor? Aye. All right.
The gator. So I did get a text from Quentin that says the current gator, the clutch and engine are getting heavily worn, and the total cost for both of those would be about half of a new machine.
If it's
Thank
not
you.
significant, I'd say that we need to move on a new one. There's no point in, I mean, when you get into the clutch, you get into transmission and a new engine. Nobody's going to do that to their regular everyday car unless you really love your car. So I think we'd want to move on it.
All right, so that's a good point, because we didn't authorize that. So is there a motion to approve the purchase of the John Deere Gator from this year's budget, utilizing the 3 lines and this year's budget, schools and conferences, material and supplies, and repairs from Doubleday, to fund that purchase for a total of $8,800?
So moved.
Moved by Richard, or I'm sorry, seconded by Mac. All in favor?
Aye.
Now are we done?
I just have one question. Do we have to approve the minutes of the last 2 meetings, or did we do that?
We did it.
Okay.
As corrected. All right, if there's nothing else, thank you. I'm sorry, and I'm sorry for whoever has to transcribe this meeting, but hopefully we weren't too verbose. Thank you all so very much. Meeting adjourned.
Thanks all.
Thanks,
Have a
everybody.
nice night.
Thanks.
I'm still on here.
Leave meeting. Leave.